as mythology. They think about it as literally true, as actually real.
Fundamentalist religious believer, they don't take these things metaphorically. These are not symbols of some higher truth. These are the truth.
So that's a very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and trans-rational myths as deeply symbolic.
People who are fundamentalist religious believers believe the myth literally, which is what you're doing, which is what Wilbur is doing.
That's a literal Cohen. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness.
And I think, based on what I'm showing you, should be undeniable. Rational people deconstruct and debunk the literal interpretation of the myth. And trans-rational people can see poetic value in the myth, ways the myth could be true if you understood it in a non-literal way. And when Ken Wilber here is saying it could represent some higher transpersonal dimensions,
and trans-rational myths that may represent some very high transpersonal dimensions.
that is true. It could, but not all mythology actually is about something transpersonal. That's not how it works. There's plenty of mythology that is interpreted more metaphorically, where you could still get some transrational value out of it that is not about something transpersonal. I can think of lots of different examples. One example is that Joseph Campbell says a transrational way of interpreting demons is that there is some kind of natural impulse within you that is being repressed. And the only way that it gets to express itself is in this hidden, secret, toxic kind of way. So, for example, priests, because they don't have a God-glorified way to be able to express their sexuality, it gets repressed. And so, because there is this unmet need in a person, and there is no healthy way to express it, the only way that it can be expressed is some kind of demonic way. So a demon is a natural impulse that hasn't been given its due. See how that isn't just saying demons are bullish or demons are true. It's saying
bullish. Yeah, and I like how the demon concept gets applied also to the Myers-Briggs types. That's where I feel that demon kind of in myself, like manifesting as the toxic behavior of the shadow type, the shadow personality type.
no, there's a poetic way in which the concept of demons could be true. Think about the Matrix. That might just be about waking up from the machine, realizing that culture and society are.
Yeah, I guess what I'm anticipating and what I'm kind of hearing and feeling is there's multiple layers to what a myth potentially can do or point to. It can have some rational value. It can be only valuable as myth. And what I guess the pointing out instruction concept is suggesting is that there are myths that have a higher potential of conveying a transcendent concept, a concept that may help a person with state practice, I suppose, and perhaps a type of myth that can ultimately lead toward development of one sort or another, like being seen as like a healthy myth. So, I mean, I brought in the idea of myth to just basically like everything everyone believes is that is what myth is, and then you check it with rational, and you check that with sensitive, and it's like, but the fundamental like puzzle pieces are built of myths of the human civilization that we pass around in language units. Looking for truth, and hopefully we find those myths. I think what the integral vision does is brings those myths into focus, which do suggest like developmental truth, like that point in that direction. But I think there's like a contrast to be made between myths whose intention is transcendental and myths whose intention is moral. I mean, there's clearly one can only assume the intention of a myth, and oftentimes myths arrive from the individual or public psychology or consciousness more than from an individual soul creator or impulse. But there is kind of an impulse to create myth for reasons, and we look at the reasons why myths exist exhaustively in the case of Campbell. And I think that there's like the myth generating cultures and the myth preserving cultures do seem kind of aligned with the concept of keeping transcendent myth intact for some reason. You know. Anyways,
Are
cool. What's
conditioning
going on with
us.
this?
Also in Star Wars, the same kind of idea. Is the system going to serve humanity or crush humanity? Think about Luke Skywalker's hand when it gets cut off and then it gets replaced with technology. His right hand becomes a machine, similar to Darth Vader, who's been fully taken over by the machine to the point where it destroys his humanity. But for Luke Skywalker, the machine actually serves his humanity. It hasn't fully taken him over. You see, this is a metaphor, not about something transpersonal, but about our relationship to technology and the machine. So when we're specifically talking about stages of cognitive,
So, okay, yeah, this is it's really using a myth as a metaphor. It's super common in today's storytelling, even in every micro element of a thing, like myth is invoked or brought out. So, yeah, I like that idea of robotics being kind of somewhat representative of the system of the Galactic Empire. Um, Not droids per se, but the cyborgification of the individual. Uh, Although, in both cases it was a medical life-preserving procedure, whether for evil or for good. I mean, it was that dang volcano and the evil in his heart, which was the undoing of Anakin, and it was the robot armor that was his rebirth. uh, and I mean, yeah, I guess Luke sort of had a rebirth as well with his robotic hand, which I suppose was, the hand he would later use to fight with. So interesting, but this is not this is not to be mistaken for like a transcendent myth. This is just a good old analogy through story. Uh, it's a tool in the rational storyteller's toolbox.
development. There are people who are pre-rational who might think maybe we are literally in a matrix. They might wonder if Star Wars or the Matrix is literally true. Rational people will just say, it's fiction, it's a story, but it's not really true. It's just a fun action movie. And then
But do think through this. If you've never thought through this before, do take the time and say like, "Hey, is this all a video game? Like dead serious? Is this just did I put myself here? Am I being tortured with this game and I'm actually my real body is somewhere else?" Just like walk through the whole thing. Make sure you've done that at some point because it is important to know whether you're in a simulation of reality or reality itself. It's important to know whether that's the case or not.
trans-rational people will be like, this story is about something beyond just the story. It's actually talking about us and our life and how we live. To be able to understand that about a myth takes higher levels of cognitive complexity. Do you see the development of cognitive complexity here? I might think it's true. I know it's not true. It's just fun. No, maybe it is true. And that follows the same kind of pattern of the yes, no, yes that we find in other developmental lines. Like, do you steal the medicine to save the life? Yes, I do, from red, because you, I do what I want, that's why. No, from blue, because no, you're not supposed to, it's against the rules. To yes, I do, because the life is worth more than the medicine. It's the same pattern, you see? That's pre-conventional.
And I always like to stress in my kind of iteration of integral that you don't ever leave a level. It's the level remains a component of your level. Like every level is not just the way some other people are. It's the way I am. Like all of the levels beneath whichever one you identify, those are totally still entirely what's going on in this experience. But you've just reorganized your perception of it into a higher level organization of perspective. So, what this suggests for storytelling and mythology as a tool is that every level, post myth, pure myth, 3 through 4, will continue to use those tools, perhaps to a diminishing extent, or it diminishes in relevance, but will still continue to use the myth tool for comprehending reality, especially as we develop through that stage. So those will always remain totally immersed in our culture. And I, as a person who I don't think I fall too hard into the like hard amber meme territory. Myth still very much appeals to me, and I like to keep up with myth, and I feel it. I feel like the values that it conveys, and I feel a resonance with them that is important to my sense of connectedness. But the suggestion is that Amber, post Amber, becomes a tool. Like your job from here on, whichever level agent you are, your job is now to craft the myth, to play with the myth, to manipulate the myth, and to generate the healthier myth. You know, depending on which level perspective you're at. But now you're fast jumping through different kind of ways of looking at the levels. So this is I'm just kind of slowing down the flow here because it's kind of dense. It's rich.
Conventional, and post-conventional as it relates to morality, hence the rules. Yes, I do, because the life is worth more than the medicine. It's the same pattern, you see? That's pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional as it relates to morality. Yes, I believe it's true. No, I understand that it's not really true. It's fiction. Yes, I understand that it's true, but not literally true. That's the developmental pattern. The pre and the trans are both saying, yes, it's true, but there's a difference in how they're saying, yes, it's true. These pre-rational people are saying it's literally true, and the trans-rational people are saying it's metaphorically true. That's the pre-trans distinction.
And then I like that for the audience, I suppose, that he's doing this, but this is like a super kind of preach down, because like we both are very immersed in this topic. He and I both know that like we could both do this speech right here.
As it relates to rationality, the trans-rational perspective transcends and includes rationality. The idea that these myths are about something doesn't contradict reality. It's saying more. Hopefully that's a good explanation of the trans-rational logic.
But that is not the state of consciousness experienced in a trans
And
person.
I mean, a really amazing thing happens at level 6, Green Meme, when we're reinterpreting myth via deconstruction, and we're really seeing into the heart of our own social system. We're really seeing into the heart of our own culture by, I mean, this is what, you know, literary criticism got up to, you know, how, why and how, and like, where does myth come from, and how does it reflect what we are, and how does it lie to itself about what we are, and how is it healthy, and how does it lead to bad outcomes? You know, all this dissection of myth and the effects of myth on who we are. And this is the birth of level 6. Level 7 as well is actively transforming myth at this time. All right, anyways, I'm trying to go quick because a lot of video to cover. I'm going to try and do it all tonight. Very chill, very late. Here we are.
Mystical state. You don't believe in transrational, if I'm understanding correctly. You don't believe that transcendental states are, in a certain way, superior in terms of comprehension of...
Yeah, to restate this in the context of what we're actually saying here, now that we're at the point that we're at here, yeah, if we don't like the word, I guess I'm hung up on not liking the word transrational for trained states just as a descriptor. I understand that that's not seen as vertical here in your telling, but even if it is this like horizontal progression of deepening ability or comprehension of trained states, as it relates to that, like, I don't know. This is why I am appealing only to my own experience. What occurs seems to transcend what I understand to be rational. So the term transrational, to me, perhaps incorrectly, seems to apply to that. But yeah, let's get into this.
Of reality superior to the comprehension that you have as ego.
As I've said, the problem here is that you don't know what transrational really means. And it is correct that I don't believe that a traditional pre-rational interpretation of states really...
I guess with regard to what you're saying, I don't know what the definition of transrational as you would state it, or I don't know what Ken Wilber's explicit definition of that term would be. It sounds like you're more familiar with that. And what I'm meaning is that it's a thing that, like, I identify very much level 5 as the rational deal, whether we're talking about thinking or pragmatism or, utilitarian, the whole gamut of orange meme. That's kind of what I'm thinking as rational. And I feel like experiencing states heavily steeped in that level, what occurs just really seems transcendent to that level. So it may be like an illusion, that occurs at level 5 or occurs with certain individuals, if that is not correctly described as transrational. Like I don't have any issue with like having really clear like nomenclature here. I perhaps use integral terminology um, less constrictedly because I'm just trying to get people to start using this language in the first place.
Represents a higher stage of development. For these states to really be representative of higher stages of development, they would have to be
Yeah, so
actually
and I
interpreted.
don't I am on the fence about whether these states are representative of higher stages of development. It seems to be a thing that Ken Wilber has asserted, and so I've kind of taken that for what it is. But I don't personally have knowledge of that, so I'm just kind of stating it as the integral theory perspective.
Interpreted in a really transrational way, not in this pre-rational way that you interpret it, that Ken Wilber interprets it, and that so many other people in the integral community
I
interpret.
can't really accept that I'm interpreting it anything less than rational because like I don't I like this is all the integral theory thing has always really appealed to like my level 5, like my desire to uh kind of like be in the critical right of things, to be like logically consistent. It's been really important to that level mostly. It hasn't really as mythology, as like mythos, I think I have been less enchanted or sucked into that. Like I've been my own personal mythos has always been hovered around level 6, my world and my spaces and my art and things like that. They've typically been like level 6 expressions. I'm pretty estranged from level 4 in general. I kind of have my own level 4 that I consider very distinct from the integral theory like community or perspective. Um, as far as like mythology goes, I suppose that I'm a pretty darn open-minded person. Like I don't actually know what the ultimate answer to any question is philosophically. Uh, but what I've found is that in my exploration of really trying to nail down anything philosophically, integral theory has done this amazing thing where you just nail down something. Like you have something there that presents a coherence that the intrinsic reality we're experiencing already has, and just kind of restates it to you like, well, here is everything there possibly is. Um, that's been the appeal of it for me. So I see that as like a really level 5, level 6 entry point to it. And I feel like it has taken many years for the actual like level 7 to seep into me. I mean, I've been interested in it for many years, but yeah, like just critically self-assessing. I think that my original interest was coming from like a level 6 place, and only really got fully like level 7 in a more at a more recent time. Just in my own like assessment.
It. And one of the things that is massively taken for granted in Adam's talks is the idea that interpretations of states are just given, as if you get into this state, then you must come to this conclusion about the state. But a lot of that is circular reasoning. Like I believe in
Yeah, I don't know. That's an open question. This is a question I would ask of anyone in the state realm. Like I'm not presenting states as a state expert. I'm presenting states like uh like the way I've presented it is just like, hey, this is kind of like how it went for me and how I'm imagining it would be for someone else. But I talk to a lot of people about states, and they seem to have wildly different ideas about every aspect of it from what I have. Uh, and again, this is why like integral theory is so special and important. Is when you talk about it within the integral theory concept, like context, there is at least that buffer that it like you can at least use these words, whether both parties kind of accept all the terms or how you understand them or whatever. At least you have these terms to talk about. Like that's really where I'm at with discussions of all this stuff, and just leaning on the fact that for me, integral theory reorganized the way that I understood, like the things that I already understood and were starting to make sense to me, made a lot of sense, but it was also pointing me at like stuff that I was not aware of. And like that took me a long time to make sense of and understand why it was important, and to internalize and to really like have a fully integral perspective. I think takes a really long time from that entry point.
Idealism. I do the meditation in the context of thinking about it in terms of idealism. And then when I achieve the state, that proves idealism. No, it doesn't. I'm a person who was raised Christian and I was on the worship team. So I had a lot of powerful religious experiences, and I've seen a lot of powerful religious experiences in the context of Christianity. And I think this was actually really helpful to me because after deconstructing Christianity, after deconstructing blue into orange and beyond, I really wanted to figure out what was going on and what was true, but I also didn't want to get caught back up in a different superstition. And one of the main things that I had to grapple with was spiritual experiences, because I knew they were real and I knew they were powerful and that they meant a lot to people. But I also knew that their translation of those experiences was incorrect, that they didn't actually prove that Christianity was true. People are like, I can't convince you with rationality. I can't tell you with words. You have to come to my church and you have to really open yourself up and like authentically let yourself have this experience. And then that'll be the proof. And then what happens is music is designed to work you up into a state. And then you start to hear this suggestive kind of framing. God's pulling at your heart right now. He loves you. You've fallen away. You've been lost in sin.
Yeah,
but
and
God
that's corporate schlock. I mean, we all like everyone knows that from like level 5 up. Like we all see the money strings pulling on that, and the social conformity layer to it. Yeah. But and I've had that experience tons too. A lot of people get a lot of what looks to me like an authentic spirituality out of that whole thing, and they mistake that whole thing for the spirituality itself. Um, I sort of feel like I am one of those people that I will like I can go to some Christian things, and I feel like I probably have a deeper experience of it than the regulars, perhaps. Maybe it's just a novelty thing. uh, but like I don't think that like the experiences that they're having in that context, I don't think that those have much coherence to like they would really need to understand integral theory to participate in that discussion with you about specifically states of consciousness and stuff. Like the integral theorist, I think, would approach that and kind of just like subtly, like in their own head, be like, okay, like I'm kind of identifying what realm of states we're dealing with here, like what, or perhaps just like, are you merely experiencing emotions, emotional states, you know, and states of inspiration and states of communion, community with other people, which are also super healthy and valuable to experience. But is there a shred of the stuff that you know states of consciousness are you experiencing anything that we could describe in that realm? I think it's rather dubious, but there are some contexts where it occurs. But like I don't see the I don't think there's any way of framing the integral theory state stages as being similar to somebody just saying like, well, you have to come to my church and participate in it in order to get what I get out of it. I feel like that's just a non-critical viewing of their spirituality. They aren't applying critical thought to the spirituality that they're experiencing.
wants you to come back in and have a new covenant with him. He wants to burn away your pain and suffering and sorrow in his refiner's fire and replace it with his love. All of this kind of stuff, all of this suggestion
It's fine.
does give a powerful experience. And often people are sympathetic to
Oof.
this worldview as it is. And if they feel something, they might take that as proof, when really, oftentimes, these are sad people. These are desperate people. These are people who come from broken families and desperate situations and would so much love the love of a father in their life, forgiveness, a second chance. And Christianity has methods of using those feelings and provoking an experience evidence that seems like proof to help a person get there. This whole thing is rooted in the context of circular reasoning. How do we know that that was really God? In fact, what we do know is actually there are better explanations for what's going on here. So this understanding that spiritual experiences aren't just whatever the tradition is telling you what they are, and that they're actually interpreted and there might be better explanations for what's actually going on there, it really helped me in not getting too caught up in some of these other traditional experiences, in particular Buddhist ones. So when I had my incredibly helpful, incredibly useful state training experiences, I was also wondering, okay, what is the practical value of these things, which there is practical value, and what are these things really showing me? What did they really prove? And
And I feel like anyone with a passionate interest in integral theory, like I don't know why a person would have a passionate interest in integral theory other than they've exhaustively they've come to this understanding that there seems to be something offered by all these like perspectives on spirituality from around the world. There seems to be something to that, but I think there are some people who don't really like critically think about it, and that's just kind of part of the culture of their spirituality, I guess. But I would not describe myself as one of those people, and I think that runs counter to the integral thinking in general. I mean, that would be like pretty unhealthy level 5, level 6. Like we're supposed to be critically examining our own perspective. So like unless it's like a part of your practice that you don't think critically about it, like I think that there's a lot of contemplative traditions that might stress that during a certain period of time, as a prescription of some sort. But yeah, I mean, it. Anyways, I don't want to get too caught in this because we're in like level 5 country. We're just kind of like stating like reason.
don't think that they really prove that consciousness is the ground of being. I don't think that's true. I don't think that is a good explanation for what's happening there. And many other people don't as well. Ken Wilber talks about deep science and says that you basically have to perform the injunction to be able to judge. I have performed the injunction.
That's I kind of want to talk about the last thing, but this is a thing that I was asking about a lot, and he has commented on it, but it's what his take on it is pretty unclear to me. But the idea of thinking of meditation like it is, it seems you can have this perspective that it seems to be like an experiment. Like if you do this, you will have an outcome that will. I mean, the outcome is so hard to put into any sort of characterization or words, but like something will happen that will be undeniably worthy of happening to you or to, in some interpretation. So like, okay, that's the whole meditation bargain, right? And to say like, that experience itself teaches a person what it is, and a person can't really understand what it is without having that experience. And really it's unteaching you something that you think you already know, as I understand like non-duality, but a fundamental like perceptual change in what you understand to be like happening in this moment, right? So assessing the value of that.
I have achieved the same result, but I don't interpret it in the way that they do, and I don't think that.
Yeah, and this is super interesting. I'm super curious about this, like because so yeah, like I'm gonna actually take it back, right? But what happened to me was like Ken Wilber presented this to me in this way, like this is an experiment, try it out. I'm saying it'll blow your mind, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it out, and I tried it out, and it did like exactly what he said, and it blew my mind, and like the way he laid it out like was that, and this wasn't exactly like the first thing or that for me or that I was exposed to like with regard to Eastern mysticism and things like that, but it was the first thing that actually seemed factually true to me. I was like, oh, okay, this is actually like real. Okay, cool. Now I'm actually super interested in this, right? Because I performed this experiment. Now, I'm not making the claim that other people will perform that experiment and have the same result. I'm actually highly suspicious of that. And I'm also not saying that when they do have whatever experiences I've had, when they do have them, that they would describe them the way that I do. I find that they don't. And I find that it's very hard to arrive at any sort of consensus on describing a lot of these things. So, again, like, I'm just working from the structure that integral theory is like the first thing that helps me to comprehend how all these things that all these different groups of people and individuals are saying about spirituality, how it can actually make a coherent sense in the world.
That their interpretation is a good or rational one. In the same way that when we're talking about this Christian religious experience, it's one thing to doubt the experience, and it's a whole other thing to talk about the rationality around the experience. And guess what? You don't actually need to have the experience to see if the rationality works. So whether or not anyone has ever had these experiences does not disqualify them from being able to know whether the logic that goes from the premises to the conclusions is good. I turn off my mind and all that's left is pure consciousness. Therefore, that proves consciousness is the ground of all being is not good logic. I don't think that's true. I don't think that this narrative actually works. I don't think that this is the way to know the truth of cosmology. I don't think this is the best explanation for what's happening. I don't think making your mind go blank, even if it makes you feel really good when it happens, that doesn't prove anything about cosmology. And we're acting like it does. We're acting like if you have this experience, then that proves it. And it does.
About cosmology, I don't know. I don't even really cosmology. I mean, I'm broadening this out. Like, I feel like for me it had, and of course this relates to how you're conditioned as a person, but it had a lot of the effect of kind of breaking through uh philosophical prejudices or perceptual prejudices that I'd had about, I mean, really kind of changing the way that I understand life, reality, morality, art, perception. To me, this is the effect, and it's all very similar. It's a breaking down of things that you've, like, it's not this crazy new weird configuration. It's a removal of a crazy weird configuration that you didn't know you had. Like, it's like you just realized that you can organize the objects around you. Like, oh, now that I know that, I can start like the process of it.
Doesn't. You know what the problem of this deep science is? It doesn't actually have good peer review because anybody who disagrees with the conclusion, even if they've had the experience, even if they've done the thing, they'll be told,
Yeah.
oh,
I'm
well,
not saying that. I'm saying, and I think Ken Wilber's saying, I think that this injunction thing is not the same as science. It's a metaphor of science. It's saying, like, this is like science in that if you do this, then you will have an experience that will make this kind of sense. And I mean, I'm not being super clear on this. I'm just trying to kind of like comprehend what you're saying about it. I guess, like, it doesn't help me much to say that this interpretation of it is wrong and bad, like, period, because I don't have a different interpretation, or I do have different interpretations of it, but I don't have a better interpretation or a more consistent interpretation. So at that point, like, philosophically, at that point, when there's like something that has proven real to me, but there are no words for it, and then words come along for it, and there are no better words, I don't see that as bad. And I do understand how someone could see that as bad. But I see it first and foremost as good, as being a way to communicate this thing that has no words, first and foremost. And then when, like, you can walk up to people in spiritual communities and use that word, and they're all like, oh yeah, that thing, I know what that is. At that point, I would start getting critical about, like, how specifically, like, that, how specifically we want to define that and what we want to, leave out culturally and things like that. And so I don't know, I'm not looking at it from like the perspective that there is this like solid cultural thing happening.
you must not have done it right. Your heart isn't open enough. You just need to keep doing it. Keep on doing it until you agree with me, and then you'll have done it right. That's not real peer review. It is not real science. So I reject all of that. I reject the idea that this is proof of the ground of being, the whole interpretation of meditation in the context of a Buddhist worldview. However, that does not mean that state training isn't useful or helpful, or even the idea of enlightenment isn't true. It is a fact of the universe that we are all connected, that we're all one, but we're all one in an inter-objective way. The self is a story that I tell about this body and its movements through time, and it is mythology. I am a manifestation of the universe in flux. So the non-dual perspective still applies. The use of witnessing still applies. The use of getting control over your mind as opposed to it controlling you is of value. So these things matter. Meditation matters. Buddhism isn't true. It is a incorrect worldview. And the value that comes from any of the religious tradition, to really get at the value, you have to divorce it from the mythology and the superstition around it. You have to deconstruct the worldview, transcend and include.
Yeah.
The things that you include are the
And I like what Wilbur has done for me is to take Buddhism and remove all the like obviously when we're talking about Buddhism, we're talking about like lots and lots of things, both East and West at this point. And we're talking about like even among those things, like wildly different interpretations and more authentic in some ways and more accredited in some ways, and some things are more popular. And it's like a real ocean of perspectives. I don't think that like at some points it seems like as though like when you're saying dogmatic Buddhism on steroids, what that suggests is like the Buddhism of like China 1000, you know what I mean? Like a very non-filtered, non-critically thought about Buddhism. So it really seems like Wilbur is using Buddhism as a vocabulary system for state practice and state realms, and he's often doing like cross comparative things between different sorts of Buddhism, as you know. And it's not like it's not really even like mainstream. Like, what even is mainstream Buddhism? Is it like having a statue or you know what I mean? Like, because I think a lot of people who identify with Buddhism don't even really know what it is. Definitely in the West, but also in the East, like everywhere. Like, I think that's probably pretty commonplace that it's just an identity marker and not really a philosophy. But I think that what you maybe should say is that Wilbur doesn't take that far enough, as opposed to saying like Wilbur is just purely presenting like dogmatic Buddhism. I think that's kind of where I feel like there's this kind of uh, gel over what's going on. I think that you're making too strong of a point. Like, your real point is that he's still doing it to a small extent, or to a large extent perhaps, but not as though he has a standard like mistaken like concept of what Buddhism is. Like, he's clearly a scholar of the subject of Buddhism.
things that are of value from the tradition, not the literal belief in the worldview of the tradition. This is an example of fair overarching standards of integration.
And like, I guess the question is like, okay, so using the mythology of Buddhism, like you have the fact of suffering, and in that in this parable there is a way out of suffering, and it goes a little something like this, right? And it's so what confuses me is I'm asking kind of, does your notion of uh what is revealed, what a non-dual perspective is, does it help with that? Is it a solution to that? Like, even just using the metaphor, like, do you to any extent think that trained states uh, help with the problem of fear, mortal suffering, the attachment to the self. Like, what is that like? Because even in just describing what non-dual is, it's like you have to convey to people that they're suffering in ways that they don't even know they can be free from. Like, I think that's pretty intrinsic to not the mythology, but the philosophy of Buddhism. And I'm just wondering if you also agree with like that these I wonder what to you the non-dual realization, what effect that has on the first noble truth, like that of suffering. Like, does it? I get a sense, like level 5 sees what's happening there as people relax and chill out, and they don't worry as much, and it's not as big of a deal, or something like that. I think, but I don't think that that's a fair characterization of what's happening there, and I don't think that you think that either. But I don't actually know. So this is like what this is hopefully kind of. I'm looking for that here.
Not privileging one of these worldviews. No traditional religious worldview is literally true. None of them are the one true way or the one way that we should look at reality. And the reason we have modes and roles are not the same thing. Modes are different ways of doing things, and then roles often include the ability to do multiple different kinds of modes. But this is self-mastery, becoming practice. And no, it's not just for first tier. When you actually consciously become particular archetypes as is appropriate to whatever your given situation is, that's part of healthy second tier self-mastery. And that's the kind of thing that you can only really start to do when you have deconstructed the narrative around self, the concept of self, and you realize that self is something that you self-author, something that you consciously become and create. This self-becoming and self-creation is something that is done on the other side of an existential deconstruction of self, and it is part of what it means to be transpersonal. Again, we don't think of the expression of second tier transpersonal in the same way that Buddhists do either. So basically, almost every
I'm a little suspicious of the location of self-authoring from 5 to 7. I don't really know, because you're just using that word. Like, so far I don't really know what that word means to you in particular. Because that is a term which would certainly apply to levels 5, 6, and 7. I think 8 it becomes a little more strange, but the way that I perceive this sort of notion is that integral is sort of like, as a level, it sort of meta manages your systems of interacting at lower levels, because like in any given context I see myself as interacting with a transaction at lower levels, and it's very clear where those transactions arise and where they become culturally normal for a level. So I see those transactions as existing at that level. So my idea of a healthy, like, integrated level 7 is that you're able to do, this is kind of what I would see as self-authoring applying to level 7, is you're really able to engage with any level or any sort of pursuit that would be appropriate to any level that is in your level 7 best interest to do, as we do have to do all the levels all the time. You're self-authoring your notion of the configuration of those things, which is kind of who you are at this point. You are the config map for how you understand yourself to be, or how we understand this phenomenon of me to be. That's kind of the level 7 self-sense, I would say. And so, like, yes, this concept applies to that. I worry about where people use it for other level purposes, but like, sure, I see that as appropriate. I guess I see level 7 as trying to bring health to all the levels in self and others. Healthy expressions.
everything that integral understands about what it is to be in second tier is not what we think it means. And maybe this would also be a good place to just add the clarification that when non-reductionism talks about sacred naturalism, it's not just talking about the normal modern orange perspective.
Right. Yeah, I get this is going to be fair, because like, he just said that word and I don't know what he means, so I just look at like what people generally think those words mean. So yeah, I'm gonna get blasted here.
Universe, and I'm in awe of the wonder of the universe, kind of an approach to the sacred. That's not what we mean. We still
Yeah.
include things like non-dual perspective and enlightenment and existential awakening and transpersonal self-creation and a lot of the spiritual practice stuff, but it's done in a way that cashes out in accord with naturalism, in a way that sees life as sacred. Seeing life as sacred is an attitude towards reality, not a claim about reality. So in that sense, it's a type of religious attitude. Again, just to be clear, it's not the same as just awe and wonder. Not only does it include a lot of the state training practice and enlightenment and non-dual perspective in a actually healthy trans-rational way, but it also includes more transpersonal conscious self-creation stuff. Not just a being focus, but also a becoming focus. So it's actually doing more. It's actually having a more inclusive type of integrative approach to religion than Integral does. As you can see throughout this talk, what I'm basically saying is that we think about these things differently. We're not saying that we don't include them. We're saying we don't bias an Eastern religious traditional interpretation of these different aspects.
Yeah, so with regard to this topic, I see this as just a dialogue that we're having about what we believe because neither of us have like as far as like non-reductionism and unthink me, like neither of us have really come out and said like I have this philosophical platform for in your case sacred naturalism. Um so yeah, I'm just at this point in the discussion I'm saying, okay, what is that? And I probably I in the context of like how states apply to that, I worry about it sliding into more commonplace definitions of those things, which it's often a form of spiritualizing an anti-spiritual perspective, or like the type of spirituality that Integral talks about and the type that I talk about. I think that there are a lot of definitions of spirituality which are to say like, yeah, I think life is grand and like the universe is really big. And they're like not serious though. They don't actually like have that sentiment. It's just kind of a way of like being in the in crowd of being spiritual. Uh, just my own kind of 2 cents on that term. So I have a again, I have like suspicions, not like when the more you describe it, the more it suggests things that are probably wrong. So, like, probably same with everything I say.
Of a spiritual practice. And we don't privilege Eastern spiritual practice over other spiritual practices. Wilbur breaks his own rules as it comes to the integration of these Buddhist ideas in 3 different ways. The first one is that it's a pre-trans fallacy. The second one is that he's qualifying the unqualifiable. He's making claims about things beyond our ability to know. And he's framing his experience in relation to those claims beyond which we are able to know. And that's circular reasoning. And then the third one is that he's looking in the wrong quadrant for data. Just because I can turn off my mind, let's say I stop all of the thinking parts of my mind, I close my eyes, I go to blackness, and there's, let's say, pure consciousness there. That's what I really am. That's my true face. That's an interpretation. Just because you're staring at your blank mind doesn't mean that that blank mind is the ground of all being. These spiritual methods are not good epistemic ways.
I think if you're looking at the lower left quadrant, it's more of a recognition of like when this person has this state and this person has this state and they talk about it, this description seems to make sense to both of them. It seems to be a descriptor for both of them. Now, is consciousness the ground of being? Like that's a mystery. What in the world could that mean? Like in literal terms, in concrete literal terms, that's an utterly like being obviously has no ground. Like obviously being, what do you mean ground? Ground? Like the ground? Like there's no gravity of being, or is there? It's a thought-provoking string of words. So it can't, I mean, obviously this is why we're qualifying the unqualifiable. Uh, but I think that in the lower left, we see that there seems to be some sorts of agreements that certain language points better, and that yeah, like looking to the upper left for data, it's more like you can look at this from the upper right and say that in the experimental injunction for data in the upper right, that if you do this behavior, you will have this upper left experience, and that will have this effect on your pragmatic real human life, in the upper right. So I don't see the state experience as being reduced to the upper left, but I think there is. I think that what you're pointing out is there is a sort of supremacy to the upper left in the experience, in that, like, it is something that must be directly experienced by whatever the individual thinks it is. That it isn't an individual, like that comes from the upper left, from phenomenological perception, but obviously that correlates with things going on in all four quadrants, right? Like, there is a behavior that occurs where that's caused to happen in the brain, however we conceptualize the brain pertaining to the upper left and your experience, and that becomes a thing that you express to other people, and you communicate to other people, and you look for signs that other people know what you're talking about, or don't, or are saying the same thing. I think that for most people who have experiences of transcendence, that's kind of where they're at with it. When it's spontaneous, I think for a lot of people who go into it in our culture, they go into it spontaneously. They come in hot. They have the state first, and then they're like looking to the literature to figure out what it is, and to have words to talk about it, and to understand whether it means they're mentally ill or not, and things like that. And yeah, there isn't a whole lot of lower right to speak of in this context. It is kind of a smaller deal at the moment, but I mean, just in the sense that I think the lower right of it is that it's astounding that through this series of states, you might be more prone to have a fundamental realization about the nature of what you are and what reality is. If you're allowing it to be called that or not, I don't know. But I think that I call it that, a fundamentally kind of shift in the way that you understand this experience to be, and that being native to the mind, that a mind can do that. That a mind will inevitably do that, perhaps, that a mind returns to that. It's a thing that I think a lot of people have never thought of before. And if they have states spontaneously, it often makes them start to wonder about that. So I'm just like, I think that just like you're trying to offer more of a pathway into this sort of stuff, I think that I'm trying to point out, like, where we need to leave, like, paths open for I like, this is a pretty like, each of these items we've been over, several times, so I don't want to do the breakdown here. I think it's cool to see it right. Like, these are the main issues. Non-reductionism is saying, like, Wilbur is straight up, like, contradicting himself. So this is super cool. This is a good place to work with.
To come to these cosmological conclusions. There's actually a better, more important methodological process by which we would understand what's true about ontology and cosmology. This is where some
Which
of the
is?
ideas in non-reductionism about nested quadratic holons and primacy come into play.
There's a sort of straw manning of Ken Wilber that I find weird for someone who is absolutely steeped on the topic, knows what they're talking about, and if there is any kind of altering of definitions,
Yeah, we've figured this one out. You don't like Ken Wilber.
stand to reason it's sort of deliberate in order to make Wilbur look bad. I don't really get it. You're using that argumentative basis, the concept of a pre-trans fallacy that Ken Wilber has apparently derived from Joseph Campbell. I don't speak for Campbell. I don't know Campbell that well. You're using that to attack Wilbur in saying that transcendental states are mythological, magical, pre-rational.
What's really annoying here is that you're just still thinking that I must be doing something like purposely misrepresenting him. I'm literally quoting him. And that's why it feels like you're not really listening, or like you're not really trying to understand, because I'm literally showing you.
This is really weird because we are such good communicators. Like, there is clearly something that I'm trying to get you to see that you're not going to see. And I think that it's clear that there's something you're trying to get me to see that I'm not going to see in this particular point. Like, where let's
I don't speak for
Good
Campbell. I don't know Campbell that well.
So-
you're using that to attack Wilbur in saying that transcendental states are mythological, magical, pre-rational.
What's really annoying here is that you're just still thinking
yeah, okay, so Buddhism is mythological, pre-rational, etc., etc., etc. But Buddhism curates to us, and those of us, let me finish, curates to us this process by which we may have transcendental states and understand what they are to some extent. Like, it curates that to us in a way that's kind of unique and that really spread across and became influential in a lot of like Asian places at first historically. Like, they did influence, like, or like that just arises in culture, we could say, like everywhere. But there was this, it was a really strong presentation of it and pretty darn pure. So that gives us, like, what I'm trying to get the cat to look in the mirror here, for me, just from my perspective, is how much people don't understand what people meditating are doing is in the first place, and how Buddhism offers, especially the integral presentation of it, the condensation of it into just really simple state structure stages, like, for people that gives them a very good stiff understanding of this concept that is hard to compare to anything else, that exists. And I think that even people like just getting into Wilbur, like they don't, I mean, I think it takes a really long time to understand this concept through any approach whatsoever. So that this is what Buddhism offers. This is a good thing Buddhism does do and has done. And a lot of the people nowadays teaching alternative or sort of demythologized and rationalized, this is a thing that has grown out of that, the Buddhist tradition. This is a thing that they've borrowed and used ideas from that. So we're just honoring the value of those practices from those traditions and how they kind of still hold up today, for what they do for a person, especially that's at the appropriate level for the presentation of Buddhism. What level is presenting Buddhism to you? But as level 7 presents it, I'm not seeing that mythology you're talking about. I'm seeing there is no vocabulary for the non-dual experience. And now I'm talking to you and I'm calling it the non-dual experience. But whatever that thing is, if that's the wrong word, then we have work to do, right? Like, at least we've arrived at something to call it, kind of, right? I see that as a good thing, like both that Wilbur did and that Buddhism did. I see the good thing and good thing, and like that's kind of what I'm focused on in both cases. But like, I don't see the Buddhism trickling into the Wilbur, and I don't see Wilbur being corrupted by it. I see him as being the very critical thinker who's like just trying to put in whatever parts of it work as vocabulary for telling a cogent telling of what enlightenment is.
thinking that I must be doing something like purposely misrepresenting him. I'm literally quoting him. And that's why it feels like you're not really listening, or like you're not really trying to understand. Because
But I really am. And I know, like, as I watch this, you're like, hey, you're not actually paying attention. But like, also understand, like, I'm just experiencing this video now as a live stream, and I intend to edit this into like a more cogent, like quick one where, I get rid of all the repetitive bits, which is like most of it, from me and from you. But just kind of like try to chisel it down into something that, where I stick to things that are kind of advancing the discussion. But, sorry, did I stop it?
because I'm literally showing you, and then you just
Oh
double
yeah.
back
So
to the
with
thing that
regard
you
to
already
like
think.
what I'm refusing to see is that the ground of being seems to me an adequate way of describing something real. Or perhaps to say, an adequate way of helping to dispel an illusion about something real that we all have. Using the ground of being as an expression seems to me to be a good way to convey what it's pointing to. And that's like, you're saying that it isn't, I think. You're saying it's mythology and that this is unqualifiable and ineffable, but I'm thinking pragmatically. I a lot of my interest in states, which I would say have benefited me a great deal, a lot of my interest came from first somebody telling me that it exists and what it is. That's kind of how I approach life. Uh, there's this thing where people sit still and then they are not as afraid of dying and like being alone and stuff, and being like abandoned by God. And so I'm like, okay, that seems like worthy of pursuing, and everything else. And this is only talking about states, right? Like all the other stuff is checking out and kind of blowing my mind about like society and things like that. But just looking at um, my spiritual experience of life, like, um, can I bring more of myself into this experience? Can I participate more? Can I be more open and charitable and to experience this more as fully as possible, and cherish it? That I guess is kind of like where I start to wonder about, what can meditation do for a person? Is that a thing that meditation can do for a person? Uh, in so far, I have found that it does do that a great deal for a person. I feel like I haven't made it all the way, and that I'm still unclear on how much it the character of the resolution that it provides, I suppose, is a way to put it, because I'm still I'm currently stuck in the illusion of being a separate self. um, which again, like, so it's not that I don't like. I guess what I'm trying to say back in response to you saying like I can't understand what you're saying. Uh, I'm just trying to verbalize like what I think what you must think I'm thinking, I guess. Like, um about Ken Wilber using mythology in states. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I must see. This is where I agree. Like, I'm probably not understanding something, because like, there's just not a lot more for me to say where to convey to you about that I can tell. There might be some things that I'm just assuming. Um, how am I not seeing that the ground of being is mythology, and Ken Wilber is entrenched in a dogmatic Buddhist worldview, and he has imposed that on the spiral dynamics model, and you like some of what he's done, but you don't like that he did that because you think it's wrong. Is Like, am I close? Like, am I getting closer? Well, we'll have a real discussion. This is fun though. Like, I like doing. Like, it's cool. It's cool. Both him and I are claiming to be like kind of level 7-ish guys, right? Like, I'm pretty mild about how I represent like anyone as any level, but I think I'm trying to be like, hey, I'm a level 7 guy. And he's definitely being like, yo, I'm a level 7 guy. So like, I like that we both present that we're like so able to talk about what we're thinking and feeling, and like how we can both, I think both of us are both capable of just being like, I definitely am starting to hone in on what you don't think I'm understanding, or what you keep saying over and over again that I'm not hearing. Like, I think both of us are pretty good at trying to. Maybe we're not very fast at it, but
No, lots and
look, we're
lots of
trying.
people have made these
Very level set.
criticisms of Wilbur, right? What more can you do besides quote him saying things and showing how he's breaking his own rules? If you show him saying one thing and then doing another thing, I'm showing you. I'm not just making claims. Like, what more can you do? At least you admit that you don't.
No. Like, you like what I'm saying is you could show like 10 times more of those clips to me, and I'd still be like, okay, this is pretty cringe. This is pretty awkward. And like, I don't disagree that like what you're pointing out in most cases, I don't really disagree that what you're pointing out is like suspicious. It's rickety. It's weird. Some guy that Ken Wilber is working with doesn't seem to have his poop in a group, like kind of thing, or Ken Wilber maybe doesn't have his poop in a group over something. Um, I'm not trying to look like a MAGA Trump defender, like trying to like make everything Ken Wilber does look good or cool. I'm like not that guy at all. I don't think. I see him as being. He describes himself as sort of an absent-minded guy, and I imagine there's probably a lot of things that he just doesn't really do that well. Everyday sorts of things, I would imagine. But I do acknowledge that there's a lot of things he does really well, and that's kind of more what I'm focused on. So like these specific claims, you're throwing them at me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a little cheesy, but I'm not having this like visceral response you're having, where I'm like completely disgusted with it, and Ken Wilber has to be the paragon of like there can be no thing that he says or does or thinks or feels in his personal life or in his community or anything surrounding him that contradicts the things that he has written in his books by the letter of the law. Like I'm not really at that level of critical. I don't think that level of critical depth is necessary for a thing that nobody knows about. And I don't. That's not the whole point. Like that's actually kind of only half the point. It's more that these things in isolate. If you're looking for bad things, you can come up with this very list, and you can prioritize it in many different ways. But I like the thing to really take home is that I've looked into criticisms historically, and I'm looking into them now, and I'm always looking into them. And it's like in the total weight of everything, I don't find this compelling. Like I don't find these arguments all that compelling. I find them curious and interesting, and then I kind of like when you say something, or when I read like the Visser or whatever, critique or someone's video on why integral is baloney or whatever, I put that in my head, and as I move forward, that exists in my head. That's kind of how I approach everything. Um, so that if someone's like, "Hey, what are criticisms of integral?" I can kind of lay them out pretty well. I'm pretty aware of them, but I think where people get hung up with MAGA and with integral theory, perhaps, is like for some reason, you find the negative bits more compelling than the positive bits, and I find the positive bits much more compelling than the negative bits, right? So, I mean, that's what we refuse to look at, it would seem, right? Like, isn't that? I don't think there's any misunderstanding here. As far as I can tell.
Don't know the work of Joseph Campbell. Because if you did know the work of Joseph Campbell and you then listened to Wilbur talking about how he gets this idea from Joseph Campbell, it would make a lot more sense to you what's actually being said here. Because there's no way that you could come away from this kind of contextualization in the context of Campbell and have your interpretation of what transrational means. If you understood what Joseph Campbell's project was, if you understood what his
one way that I could do that is that if I didn't consider that moment to be canonical, that's one way that I could walk away from that. Like that I don't consider that clip all that important or definitive of the word rational. Like, so again, like you're going to interact with people who haven't read everything by Joseph Campbell or done any like term papers on Joseph Campbell. And that means they will be somewhat ignorant of what he contributes to thought. So if that person is incapable of understanding integral theory, then this is a problem with non-reductionism, that it must be a part of the core requisites of non-reductionism, that you must understand Joseph Campbell's work and be like well read in it. I'm kind of familiar, it's a cultural meme, like everyone knows Joseph Campbell to some extent, but yeah, I'm not like a student of his. It's just there's many great thinkers that I haven't read and that I'm not an expert on. So yeah, like where Ken Wilber, so that kind of makes me special in that I'm only interpreting what Ken Wilber has presented as this idea. And if you're taking it a step further and saying that he's misrepresenting Joseph Campbell, that isn't relevant to my understanding of what Ken Wilber has presented as this concept of pre-trans fallacy. So, I mean, it's more of like a... Yeah, it would be interesting to see a presentation of it that made it very different from how Ken Wilber presents it, but was still so effective, because I feel like people, regardless of who coined the idea or who came up with it, it seems like the reason we're using it is because Ken Wilber like used it in this way, in this specific way. But again, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, and I think that it is kind of a meme. It's like an idea that will occur to people in this field. But I'm happy to hear a more informed perspective on any thinker. That's like a large part of what I do here, and it's awesome to have the resource of, I plan to do a talk with the guy who's more of a student of Jean Gebser. I always invite that sort of thing, but I don't think that, like, if I don't know Campbell, I don't see where Wilber is being disruptive of him, and I don't see how that's relevant to his presentation of the topic.
His work was, you would know that basically everything that he's always talking about is about interpretation of mythology in a trans-rational way, and not just in a way that is talking about transpersonal or states. Basically, Joseph Campbell is saying that these hero adventures in mythology are about us. The point of them is that we identify with the hero and we learn the lessons that the hero learns. And as you know, not all mythology is about some transpersonal awakening. The point of a lot of hero adventures could be something about different kinds of virtues, like about courage, finding your own...
So okay, here we're talking about, this is what I consider the meme of Joseph Campbell. Like, this is the stuff that I feel like in general people know.
Own path, rescuing something vital and life-giving and bringing it back to society. At the end here, the lady is asking, so can I tell if it's trans-rational if you say it's as if this and this and this?
From the outside, how do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or trans-rational level? Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
And then he says, yes.
Yeah.
Because as if is
He
a
says, yeah.
higher form of translation than the purely literal rational. That's what makes it trans-rational.
As if, the capacity to form a cognition that says it's as if this is the case, it's trans-rational.
It's a higher level of interpretation. Okay, at this point, I'm going to...
As if is trans-rational. As if. It's as if. So... rational is incapable of forming an it's as if statement? Like, yeah, this is a good thing to hang up on, because I actually don't know that I understand like really what you're trying to...
And then he says, yes.
Yeah.
Because
they were able to say, I'm going to act as if.
And then he says,
it's like, it's a bizarre question, first of all.
Level. Would it be if they were able to, from the outside, how do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or trans-rational level? Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
And
I'm going to act as, a pre-rational. Well, yeah, that's how you would distinguish between someone who is at a pre-rational or a rational level, right? Like, a person at a rational level can act as if something, right? A person at level 3 can act as if. What the heck is the meaning? Am I supposed to know more about the question being asked here than what she asked? And like clearly, like maybe there need. All right, all right,
And
all
then
right,
he
all right,
says,
all right. You're gonna get
yes,
mad because it
middle
actually
virtues,
explained it.
like giving hell if it's
How do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or transrational level? Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
And then he says, yes,
Yeah.
because as if is a higher form of translation than the purely literal rational. That's
Because
higher form of translation than the purely literal rational. That's what
but doesn't rational, wouldn't you subdivide rational into like rational as a stage? Well, okay, there's like a 3-stage model, right? Like pre-rational, rational, transrational, perhaps. And then there's like a 12-stage or 7-stage model where rational is like level 5, right? And then in Piaget terms, like you have a kind of concrete operational, formal operational stage. The concrete operational is more the concrete literal. The formal operational is more the abstract lateral, right? Like rational, level 5. And concrete applies more to like level 4 thinking, like where analogy is very difficult, but like pinning things down is unfortunately very easy at level 4.
what makes it transrational.
As if, the capacity to form a cognition that says it's as if this is the case, it's transrational.
It's
See, but like I get why I think that we both get why we're hung up here, because I was using the word to apply to states, not to levels. That's when I was using that word, and that is to me like still kind of an unresolved issue. But this thing we're talking about now, I just feel like I was using the word rational in a way that's like not supported by Campbell or perhaps Wilbur, and particularly in this discussion where it's like being brought up as a point, because there is an implied context with integral, whether you're talking about states or stages. This is actually kind of a problem with integral, is that we might use a lot of the same vocabulary for those two kind of different progressions, the states progression and the levels progression. We might use some of the same sort of concept of waves or no skipping stages, transcend and include, things like that might pop across between them. So like, yeah, when I'm using rational, when Wilbur's using rational, let's say, he's usually either referring to the 3-stage model, just pre-rational and then trans, or he's referring to rational as level 5, right? In a fully like altituded or spiral dynamics like system, and those have subtly different applications and meanings. But what remains kind of the issue is whether the state experiences, or at least the initial experience of states, transcends rationality, and so then the term would be appropriate there as well. Which I don't care either way. I don't care either way whether that word can mean that or that. I was just using it for lack of a better word for a thing that seems to transcend my concept of what rationality is.
a higher level of interpretation. Okay, at this point, I'm going to digress. I think we have
Cool. Good,
covered
good.
this point. Hopefully now I have explained it more in detail to the point where it's very clear what transrational means, why I shared this clip with Joseph Campbell in the first place, and I hope that's helpful to you. You should definitely check out the work of Joseph Campbell. Unfortunately, the Joseph Campbell Foundation
I
is
think
still
it's important to differentiate between like I think it's weird to put people down for not knowing non-reductionism. I guess I would just say as a general statement about that. Just like I would also think it was weird, and I catch myself sometimes like putting people down for not knowing integral theory because it's like so important to me. And it sometimes feels like people are very obstinate in like when I try to communicate integral theory to them. It's can be a thorny issue for people, and then it becomes an increasingly thorny issue as this keeps like occurring over and over in multiple different contexts, and you start to feel kind of like there's nobody to talk to about this topic because everybody like assumes you're trying to indoctrinate them, when you talk about what really matters to you. So this problem occurs both ways. This is kind of my experience of the level, and so like within the community, we can have like more just like straight ahead lateral conversations, and I think it's all like a really good thing. I do think it's helpful, and I think what you're doing is helpful too. I'm just interested in keeping Integral, the value that I've derived from Integral. I feel a drive to preserve that, whatever that looks like.
Still keeping a lot of Joseph Campbell's stuff by Campbell in the first place, and I hope that's helpful to you. You should definitely check out the work of Joseph Campbell.
But I mean, so like, and the thing about like statements like that is like, yeah, like human life is there's a lot of different ways to look at time and human life, but part of the experience I've had is that it's like it's not really appropriate to assume that anyone should be familiar with any particular thinker in the world of people. Like, or at least for me, that's always been disappointing. And I think it's a valuable thing and a cool thing when someone is familiar with the thinker that you're familiar with, or more familiar. And I see that as always an invitation to share knowledge about something that I value, that I found valuable, and to say like, I guess I've just don't like every time I've looked into Campbell, I just keep hearing the same things that I already know about him, like because he is such a meme, like because he's penetrated into so many other people's work. It's like you're going back and digging it up, and it becomes a much more like academic process at that point. Like I don't really want to be a scholar of Campbell, and I feel like most of what his books contain is known culturally by most most people who are pretty like plugged into culture. I think it's kind of just out there at this point. But yeah, where you get in with any thinker, you can get into the weeds and you can find some really amazing stuff. And I just see that as like a learning opportunity and a sharing opportunity, but not a point of like, I'm not ashamed that I don't know about that I don't know more about Campbell or Jung or Wilbur or anything really, because I know that I've put a lot of work into what I know, and I've put a lot of work into a lot of other things. I'm generally like a person who puts effort into things. So like, yeah, it's kind of old school, I think, these days with how much information we have available to us. Like, it seems to me like in this time, it is impossible to know everything that might be referenced in a given context. So I've kind of abandoned that. I think that's characteristic of people, a lot of people in my generation. I'm just like surfing. I'm surfing on what's happening.
Unfortunately, the Joseph Campbell Foundation is still keeping a lot of Joseph Campbell stuff behind a paywall. They have little clips of some Joseph Campbell Power of Myth stuff on YouTube, but you really got to check out his in-depth work. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to include a link to a Google Drive that I have with all of his stuff in it, all of his videos and stuff. So check the description for the link to that Joseph Campbell Google Drive. I would highly suggest.
Well, but dude, like David, like it's not that I don't want to read this or that I'm like being stubborn or something. It's like I have a drive full of books that I haven't read yet, and I have a shelf full of books. I don't keep books that I've read. I throw those out or give them away. Like there's so much to read though. Like I haven't read Ken Wilber's most recent book. That's what I'm reading currently. And like, geez, how much time do you have every day to read? I have practically none. Like I could make an hour, I guess. I like probably spend about 10 minutes a day reading now these days. So everyone's like in a different, setup. A lot of us have like families. A lot of us have like really hard jobs. Some of us, some of us play video games all day. Like, you ought to read some damn books, or just keep playing video games, and maybe they'll reference books so much that you'll already know what's in them. But like, I can't like. I might like give me the best one. Tell me the best one, and like if you really think that's like. When people recommend a book to me, I'm saying, is that the number one book that you would have me read? Or are you just bringing it up in the context of this conversation? And I've gotten some really weird books by posing it that way. Really cool books, too.
You download all that stuff and check it out because it is awesome. Joseph Campbell's work.
Oh, by the way, I haven't like looked at chat or anything. I just jumped right in. I really should, because I have no idea whether I did everything right or anything. I just kind of wanted to do this. Are you blind? Uh-oh. That's probably bad. Answer. Are you not seeing comments? One last big question. Did you ever think, oh gosh, that was normal? That was a normal transaction? Geez, I'm sorry. No, I'm trying to get through this, and it's really long and it's really good, and we're having a good time, and I love that you're here, and I want to answer your questions. But I mainly came here because I don't want to. I just set up my whole stream again, and I hope it looks and feels nice to you and sounds okay, and that this will help me to make this into a edited video. And continuing the process right now. Yeah. So no, you're good. You're good. You're good. It is. I mean to look at the chat, but I'm navigating this video, and it's an intensive navigation process. So I am watching. I am here. I appreciate checking in, and let me know if there's anything I'm doing weird or it's not working or something. Oh, you're talking to someone else. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I'll try to keep my eye on that. But as this video is intensive navigation right now, I'm not able to look at chat right now. I'll get better at that too,
Work
guys.
is totally worth
Don't you
digging
worry.
into and going over.
Appreciate you, anyone being here at this hour. I've been working really hard, and I'm just glad to be here, and really glad to, feeling really honored by this video, and glad to hopefully finish it up tonight.
It over and over and over again, because I promise you'll get more and more out of it as you dig in deeper and deeper. But anyways, before we move on, there's one last
That's
thing
what
I
she
want to
said.
show you. Going back to the whole idea of Christian interpretations at every stage.
Oh my
Remember the
God.
core integral program I was showing you before? There's a place where you can hover your mouse over each one of the types of interpretations of states from different stages all the way up. And
think
for
I've
the
done
subtle
this.
line, it's doing interpretations of Jesus as subtle all the way up, which is weird because people at a traditional stage don't think of Jesus as just a subtle experience. They think of him as a historical and real figure. And there's plenty of people at other stages who would think of subtle types of experiences in very different ways. So it's kind of strange to think of people at all stages thinking about Jesus. But check out this video.
Jesus is the bringer of powerful emotional forces and the wielder of magic. Jesus is my personal protector. He performs miracles that protect me.
Hang on. Okay. Let me wrap my. I think I've done this before, and I think I didn't know this was like actually on Integral. I think someone has done this video before. There was some person who has amazing time management skills, made a video where it went through every single state at every single level, and like it seemed like they did pretty well. So, but okay, so here we're gonna look at, this is how something on Integral, which like it's not in a thing I've read. Like I don't consider this the content. So yeah, anything you're pointing out that's stupid or cringe here, I'm probably gonna agree with you, and it's not gonna make me think that integral theory is stupid and wrong. It's gonna make me think that this thing, what is kind of silly, is a little cheesy. This one thing, and maybe it is. So like, just jumping into it, I'm gonna guess that this will be kind of cheesy, and like that doesn't drive me up the wall or anything. It's just like I kind of don't pay attention to things like that.
What I want, and he takes care of my health. Jesus is the one and only true Son of God. Jesus is the defender of humanistic.
Wait, so he's going through it real quick. All right. Defender of humanistic reason and all people like me. He teaches me that God's superiority is not in his moral dictatorship, but in his creation of a rational universe with free will. Wilf? Is it? Okay. I encounter Jesus, and he explains that God is precise and rational, does not oppose my individualism and pursuit of happiness. What does I encounter Jesus mean? That's not orange. Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to agree with you.
Reason
I was hoping that I would read it and find it really compelling and cool. All right, level green Christian. So, okay, yeah, like I'm 100% agreeing. Amber Meme is infusing the worldview of whoever elected to create the Christian map of Wilbur Combs Lattice, but replace it with a better one. Because you can, like, this is why, I think this might be why you're frustrated, is you could make a better one. And I probably could make a better one. This one sucks. But I'm not seeing that as like an attack on me. I'm like looking at it as like a business opportunity. Like, okay, cool. Like, could I do this better? Like, this looks wrong. Jesus is an egalitarian. Sure. I mean, wouldn't you say? A defender of marginalized souls and someone who witnesses humanness over divinity. No, I don't know if he's someone who stresses humanness over divinity. Was he? I feel like well, as a prophet, perhaps. That's an interesting way of putting it. Okay, all right. I encounter Jesus on behalf of all of us, and I bring his message of forgiveness, peace. Why do you have to say I encounter Jesus at every level? Do you encounter Jesus at every level? I see him. Okay, magenta. Jesus is the bringer of powerful forces, these forces. Where did we introduce the concept of encountering Jesus? This is like deep Christian lore that I'm not aware of. So I guess encountering Jesus is just like when Christianity fully enters your heart and you feel spiritually compelled by Christianity, I suppose. So I encounter Jesus on behalf of all of us, and I bring the message of forgiveness, peace, and desire for us to heal society. So yeah, this is kind of how I experience Christianity, but it gets worse. Just wait. He communicates with us. Jesus, communicates with us about God's message. Yeah, and I've gone to green meme like churches, and they do talk like this. This is like real green meme church talk. But like, again, why are you in a church if you're so green meme? Behalf of all, and I bring his message of forgiveness. Okay. Okay, he communicates with us about God's message, which is allegorical and open to interpretation by other traditions, but not that he communicates with us about it. You know, that's the problematic moment right there. Is when they use this pushy language, like, who are you to say he communicates this to me? Like, I get that you might feel that, but it's like almost like you're the authority on what Jesus secretly does within our hearts. Like, yeah, so I'm getting that creepy vibe from that he communicates with us about God's message line. The rest of it, I think, is pretty close to the green meme Christianity as a church that I've seen. For adhering to different beliefs, I see Jesus as my ally and my friend. Aww.
Jesus is an egalitarian. Jesus is a grand unifier, a great realized being. Jesus is the divine face of a cosmic integrative principle. In Jesus, I encounter a reflection of myself as a facet of the divine. Jesus is...
I can't really speak to this. But I was sort of the mind that those who are really deeply critical monastic Christians or whatever, they wouldn't pose it like, they wouldn't start with like, through Jesus, or Jesus shows us, or Jesus, like, that's something that would be considered like Mickey Mouse, I feel like. So yeah, this is it really feels like the Amber Meme Thought Police had a lot of say in what could be said here, or just somebody deeply paid by Amber Meme interest created this and had it placed on Integral, and David's saying that shouldn't be there, that this is silly, this is ridiculous. I'm saying it's silly and ridiculous, and I didn't even notice that it was there. So
is the core reality of me and all beings. Jesus is the pure transparency and openness.
Wait, but can it be? So let's say I forgive Jesus being there. Is the pure transparency and openness that cleanses all sin and despair. I don't understand. uh, enveloping me in his halo of light and love. I have only to accept. This is just baloney. Yeah, this is just straight up
that
like
cleanses
silly.
all sin and despair.
Maybe it's not. Like again, this is the problem of, how would I know? How would I know if that's silly at that level? But I'm over here level 7. I'm suggesting that this all looks rather suspicious. Yeah.
Jesus is the
Anyway,
pervading,
okay, all right.
all-present ground of all being.
At the highest level, the clear light level, Jesus is a metaphor for consciousness as the ground of being. So here you have it, the conflation that I'm talking about. Jesus is Buddhism. This is the highest interpretation. Jesus is
Buddha. So in this metaphor, I'm going to listen, but in this metaphor, Jesus is a metaphor for the ground of being, and in integral theory, Buddhism is a metaphor. The ground of being is a metaphor for the ground of being, right? In Buddhism, the ground of being is a metaphor for the ground of being, which is a metaphor for the ground of being, which is a metaphor for the, right? So, because there's turtles all the way down here. So, yeah, no. Jesus being a metaphor for the ground of being should have happened a long time earlier. Okay, no, I just arrived at your point, like why this is cool. Because in the ultimate conflagration, in the ultimate team up of the evils of dogmatic Buddhism and dogmatic Christianity, we find that the non-dual individual society, the non-dual complex, the non-dual as a level of development, what the hell, is not Jesus, but the ground of being. So a translation from that language so at the highest level, you realize not Christianity, but Buddhism, actually. I mean, kind of, but you realize that a lot lower, though, I think. I think you realize that like level, you unrealize it at level 5, and then you like start to realize it again at level 6. But because everyone's gonna come down on me if I don't think so. This is just referring to the culture that I experience, which is just its own little pocket of reality with people in it that do things in patterned ways. Probably characteristic of level 6
Buddhism.
civilization.
This is what I'm talking about. It's
yeah.
starting.
Okay, so I hope that I've conveyed that I understand what you're saying there. Okay, like that's what I'm trying to do, because you seem to be hung up on that I'm misunderstanding you. So I'm just trying to take these points and iterate to you what I think you're saying.
From the conflation that I'm talking about. Jesus is Buddhism. This is the highest interpretation. Jesus is Buddhism. This is what I'm talking about. It's starting from assuming
But
that
Jesus is the ground of being. So this is, oh God, it's not even like, it's not you and it's not your ideology. It's a technique. It's a chess move that you do. Watch this.
About Jesus is Buddhism. This is
so the thing. Gosh damn it! This is what happens.
Present,
right?
ground of all being.
Jesus is the ground of being.
At the higher Buddhism. This is what I'm talking. Is Buddhism.
And becomes Jesus is Buddhism. Like you walk through the steps of why you're saying that. That's not the problem. It's that they didn't say that. They didn't say Jesus is Buddhism. You're saying that the ground of being is Buddhism, right? So that needs to be included in that, like, because at the end of that train, you're saying something, you're misrepresenting what they said, which I don't care about. Like, I don't care about that. And I don't care, like, I like picking it apart, but it's not important. What happened in that treatment would be instantly recognizable to me as a thought-provoking thing that was not done very well and was not really again, I would say of that doesn't seem to be informed by state realization. Like but you might say they have had state realization, but they're at a low level. Okay, I didn't realize states work that way, and I still need more data before I really believe that, because in my own case, the state has really altered a lot of how I see things. Um, so I would like what I would love to do is really spell all that out, in clearer terms. That's the clarity that I'm looking for in any presentation of integral.
So here you have it, the conflation that I'm talking about. Jesus is Buddhism. This is the
the ground of
highest
being.
interpretation. Jesus is Buddhism.
So
This is what I'm
okay,
talking
okay.
about.
So since you did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. Can you see why it feels to me like you're not understanding that you can't literally say that the video said that? And that because of that, that's not a sin. I don't mind that. That's fine. It's a chess move. It's a tactic. But when you do that, it makes me feel like you're yelling it into, like you're mad. You have an emotional reason why you're doing a tactic instead of like more fairly just presenting the information to someone. And it may seem to you like I'm doing an apologistic tactic where I'm presenting the information in a more favorable way. I try to present anything that I find favorable in a more favorable way. So sure, I am slightly doing that. And so I'm not trying to present it in a less favorable way. So like, I think that really yeah, I would like to see like either, okay, yeah, that is kind of funny that literally, like, technically what I'm doing is kind of weird in all these cases, right? Like, it's the same pattern, it's the same technique. Like, you make a case, but then you misrepresent. By the end of your case, you've changed the original thing to a different thing, and you're using that thing, a straw man, as the basis that you're arguing against. It's very visible, and it's not a problem. It's not a big deal. It's just like, okay, I see that happening, and then I'm like curious to move on from it, like that thing got like, because I'm still going like, wait a minute, that wasn't the original thing, because this is about what the ground of being is. And I agree with you that like a Christian apologist will represent that in a cheesy way, but I don't agree with you that when it said Jesus is a metaphor for which it didn't say either, it said in some fancy flowery way that Jesus is a metaphor for the ground of being. It is understanding the ground of being to be just a way of describing whatever a non-dual a non-dual consciousness is, I believe. And it would be used in the same way in a Buddhist representation if it was like that one, I suppose. So it's like we don't need to do all that extra legwork. You can just say that the ground of being, which you do, but then the legwork. The ground of being is not a good concept, a good way of representing the non-dual fact or whatever, non-dual perception.
About. It's starting from assuming that a pre-rational narrative is true and interpreting everything in the context of that, even gross, subtle.
But the reason that the reason I have trouble like walking a mile in your shoes with regard to the non-dual, the ground of being mythological, is like, obviously that I think of the ground of being as being an absurd verbal statement, like that it is not, that to take ground and being literally is a nonsensical prospect. You have to kind of look at what we're meaning by ground and being. And we went through it actually, like word by word. We kind of looked at a statement by Wilbur about that. And it's clear that we just have sort of a difference in terms of how that experience can be described verbally, right? I mean, isn't that what this is, this moment? It's not like a huge existential difference in how we see reality. It's that you would accept fewer ways of describing, let's just say, non-duality, because you don't agree that there is a level 12, as I understand. So forget about that. But you are less tolerant of the ground of being used as a descriptor in that context. You find that to be mythological. I find it to be a good descriptor for lack of a better descriptor, and I believe that it is impossible to find that there is no descriptor. There is no descriptor, right? We agree on that it's unqualifiable. So just pick one and stick with it, or pick a handful. Pick good ones, right? What makes it good? This is the kind of discussion I'm having, right? Is ground of being good? That's a question I can ask, is that a good way? And what are we describing? What is that? That's the kind of conversation I have with that. Like, if it's not good, I don't want to dwell on that. Like, I mean, yeah, like, I don't know what the hell. It's good for me because, I guess the way that I kind of comprehend non-duality must be coming from Mahamudra and Advaita Vedanta, even though I've never studied those. It's coming from those, I should assume, and it's carrying a lot of like language from there, for lack of better language, right? And yeah, just like open a different language. I would even offer like a substitute first, I guess is kind of
causal and non-dual. This is a literal, traditional, dogmatic Buddhist narrative. Non-reductionism doesn't talk about states in terms of these gross, subtle, causal, non-dual kind of terminology.
Sure. Okay. I thought you did. I thought trained states did. Okay. Yeah. No, that was still an open question. I still don't know how you represent them. I thought that you considered trained states to be like just an upper left thing, and you said that you like the WC matrix, as you call it, I believe, showing the levels with the states as being horizontal, perpendicular. You like that, but it's not in your thing. I didn't realize that. I figured that since you liked it, it was in your thing. So okay, then we just don't really know, and that's why I start to make assumptions about what you think about states, since they're prominent. Okay, yeah. So you must have a different language set for whatever psychic subtle, causal, non-dual, whatever that's referring to. You must have a different language set, or language set which corresponds differently to the terrain in question. No idea. But I think Wilbur is like, I like that system. I'm not seeing an issue with it. I don't have a better way of describing any of that stuff. I have a slightly better one that I'm coming to. I'll talk about that in a while.
All a very Buddhist ontology, a Buddhist perspective on what reality is, claims about what states are. That's very Eastern idealistic interpretation of states, as if they're ontological realms. We don't talk about states like that. I mean, really, that's just a thing across the board. We include a lot of the same factors, but we think about almost all of them differently.
Yeah, this is a thing I actually notice prominently in Wilbur's work, that I noticed it in Integral Life Practice. They're not just making the claim that the gross, subtle, and causal bodies are phenomenologically felt. They are saying that those bodies exist physically. Well, maybe not physically, maybe not physically, but they're saying that they exist also in the upper right, and that's a very strange and suspicious claim. I don't necessarily feel like I have the answer to that. I assume it's the upper left. I just assume that's upper left stuff. It becomes upper right through our imagining of it, as things do. But that is very not strict upper right stuff. That would mean it's upper right in the sense of being a behavior, or being a currency that a person uses to evaluate, how they're doing. So those are things I could vaguely put into the upper right. So okay, all right, we're getting into it, I think.
Reductionism isn't a Buddhist worldview. We actually do healthy, fair, overarching standards of integration. But again, I digress.
Yeah, and I guess to engage with it more, I think I'm starting to pick up a little more, maybe. I think that parts, if you just take Buddhism at its word, at face value, it conveys something which is true, something which is true. So probably a level 4 thing, right? It conveys something that can be understood metaphorically, um, that is of immense value to people and doesn't seem to be available elsewhere. So it's more that I feel like those concepts from Buddhism that we don't have available to us are included into our concept of reality as real. Um, but not the mythology of Buddhism, only those things which appear to be real, which seem to be more real than the counter narrative of non-Buddhist aware sources. There seems to be something there that they're offering, and the tricky question of how do you include that truth into your philosophy of reality, how much of it do you include? And how do you do the inclusion? Do you translate it to a different language and translate it to your own culture? Do you try to keep the original translation, the original culture intact? There's different approaches to that. But if I find something of value in Buddhism that I can't find elsewhere, that I find to be true through experimentation, I find to be true, um, in a very not, in a way that just doesn't, that's only testable in an upper left kind of context, I suppose, like where you can only kind of say like, did this happen or did it not happen? You know, did the instructions turn out to be true or not? I mean, perhaps could be measured in the upper right, but we don't really do that. It really screams experience in the upper left, and then it's communicated in the lower left. So it's like more a problem of integration. Like I think it's like, so yeah, I'm just saying I think it's overblown to call that like integral is corrupted or utterly subsumed by Buddhism. I actually think that those parts of Buddhism are true, or that they convey information that I don't know another way to get to without, maybe not the narrative. There are narratives that I feel like you have to be aware of. They don't have to be specific ones, but some sequence of narratives is going to inform any philosophical perspective, right? So how do you include that into your view of reality? The quickest and dirtiest way is to just like tell Buddhism again in your own way, and that's what a lot of Western thinkers have done with it. So Wilber's done that as a philosopher, and I think it works for me. I don't think that it means that his model of reality is just Buddhism. I think that it's trying to incorporate all the truths that are found anywhere in anything, and everything that proves true goes in the bucket.
So, as I said, I was in the integral community for almost 2 decades, but there are also other critics who are saying very similar things to me who have been in the community for as long, if not longer than me. And instead of just having me talk about these things and me say these things, I think it would be helpful to hear what some other people have to say. So
Dope.
I've made some short clips,
Cool. Okay.
heavily edited down for time and space. I just think it would be helpful to hear some of these things from more people than me.
Yeah, I do
because
too.
you should know
Yeah.
that these criticisms that I make are not just my opinion. A lot of these criticisms are consistent themes that have come up over and over and over.
But like, I don't think, they're consistent. They're very consistent. They're very, they're very of the same character, I find, right? Uh, but it's as though to suggest like people generally go to integral and then they lose interest when this criticism starts to occur, and I don't really think that's what happens. I think that people just kind of fade. They just kind of lose interest because it's not much of like a thing from their perspective, right? So they just lose interest in it. And I think that it's only really people who get really, really deeply into it that start having these sorts of criticisms or not. Some people do, some people don't. So I'm curious. Yeah, this is great. I can't wait to see this.
again by critics in the community. Many of them started out as huge fans of Wilbur. Many of them have rich spiritual practices, have done psychedelics, have done lots of work in the integral community for a lot of years. So I hope you'll consider some of their perspectives in good faith. Let's get into it, and then I'll come back around at the end with some final thoughts. So this is a book by David Christopher Lane. He's a professor of philosophy at Mount
That's very appealing to me. That book's marketing appeals to me immediately.
San Antonio College. His wife is as well. He is also a lecturer in religious studies at California State University in Long Beach. He got his doctorate in sociology from the University of California, San Diego, and he has a master's in the history of phenomenology of religion from the Graduate Theology Union in Berkeley. He's the author.
I'm not going to say this a ton on my channel, but I haven't said it much. It's not 100% of the time, but academic credentials often mean like not a whole lot to me, and not because I'm not saying those don't represent something, which they totally do, and they should, but it is quite possible to have like 5 PhDs and be like totally nuts. I don't know how people do this, but it happens from time to time. So, but no, maybe not that intensely, but like often credentials, like you can throw all these credentials at me and then a person comes up and they're an idiot. You know, that's happened to me a lot. So it's like, okay, lots of credentials on this person,
Author
right?
of
Like how many was that?
sociology from the at
Wait.
California State University in Long Beach.
Yeah.
He got his doctorate in sociology
So
from the
doctorate in
University of
sociology.
California, San Diego, and he
Cool.
has a master's in the history of phenomenology of religion from the Graduate Theology Union in Berkeley. He's the author of several books. So Dr. Lane
Right. So this communicates to me this person is extremely intelligent, and and either that or they like fit in really well and were rather intelligent.
is a serious source, and his book here is called Frisky Dirt: Why Ken Wilber's New Creationism is Pseudoscience. Came out in
cool.
2011. Lane argues that Wilber's Eros in the Cosmos idea, the claim that evolution is driven by a spiritual force pushing towards higher consciousness, is essentially a new form of creationism disguised as evolutionary theory. This introduces non-falsifiable metaphysics into empirical science, which makes it pseudoscience. Wilber's claim is that Eros guides complexity and consciousness, which introduces supernatural agency, and evolution requires no guided intelligence. Wilber's claim is that spirit drives development, which is not testable or falsifiable, and the scientific method requires testable predictions. Wilber's claim is that random mutation plus natural selection aren't enough, which is an argument from ignorance fallacy, and complexity can emerge through known mechanisms. So it's really an ignorance of what science already knows. This is why I said he elevates minority creationist positions within the science community to advocate for his ideas.
Okay,
He
and
says
so
that-
you know where if we'll understand each other a lot better if you understand what I'm going to say right now. You know, like if you understand exactly what the pattern will yield this time. It starts with how that thing that he's calling Eros. What do you call that? Does it just utterly not exist? Is it not in reference to a thing that you have a description of in some way, shape, or form? Is it not relevant to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? This is like, I don't even know how you could like make a claim. Like it's basically we're saying, and I say this a lot. I think one of the most remarkable facts that stretches across the whole universe and every fact of life and every dimension of life, it seems to be this developmental progression that things complexify and things build into bigger things, and all things are made from these really, really, really basic, primitive things that don't have a lot of diversity at all. And then those grow into this increasing novelty and diversity. Novelty theory, I think, Terence McKenna is like another way of kind of suggesting that. Perennial philosophy often will suggest something of that nature. Obviously, Andrew Cohen has a lot of talk about this sort of thing, and a lot of Wilber's sources talk about this general sort of thing. I find it as being very distinct from all expressions of creationism I've seen so far. I think intelligent design would be wise to move into thinking more like this, but I don't think it does currently. And I don't think that this idea of Eros is the same as intelligent design, which has a pre-assumption that Eros is somehow like the hand of God or the spirit of God in particular, as opposed to The way I understand eros or this thing is just that it's a fact of of the cosmos, of the self, that it is an evolving stack of levels that can stack higher. And this has always been the case, and it seems that it always will be the case in time, which is relative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like in any situation I'll find myself, this will hold true, that what's occurring is a developmental progression, at least from that dimension. We can see that this is true, right? So that's a thing I'm calling eros, that we can call eros, like that. If it is one way to tell the story of time zero. It's one way to tell the story of creation, what happened from the beginning of time to the end of time, what's going on right now, what happens over and over again, right? To describe it all as a development towards greater inclusion, complexity, consciousness, et cetera, we're just calling that eros. It's not it is a mythologizing in the sense of putting it into a word, but it's referring to something that has no word for it. It's sort of a concept that's meta to our concerns. It's a meta concept generally to our concerns. If you're suggesting that someday we'll just like find that, oh, there's an actually like specific thing, or that you're saying we know that now through like systems theories and things like that we already understand through biological evolution theory, we already understand, for whatever reason, we already understand that there is a specific mechanism that generates this character to the universe where no matter what you throw at it, it will generate new levels of complexity, and diversity, and they will be more awake and alive and alert and aware and movable, and it is as though every stage is a slightly more awake version of manifestation. It's like a strange observation that is really, really central and pertinent to what I'm experiencing here. But I think that it's very self-consciously, using a Greek word, very self-consciously mythologizing that into that word. So using a mythological word for like a thing that just doesn't, it's like as though, whether we want to call it a truth, a rational truth, or a transrational or pre-rational truth or not, it's a thing that there's not a word for, and you tend to use mythology in that case, or linguistics, one or the other. But it would be hard to pin that down. Evolutionary impulse maybe, but impulse implies things about the character of reality.
That eros is this supernatural metaphysical force, and Wilber frames it as science, but this is not science. Lane says Wilber switches back and forth between saying that eros is metaphorical and eros is literal, which avoids accountability in either domain. The main argument in a nutshell is that any claim that evolution requires intentional guidance is by definition creationism, even if you rename that creator eros or spirit. Lane argues that Wilber rebrands God in developmental language.
But design suggests, like, okay, like just to hash it out in like where I think there's kind of a smudging going on here. The design thinker thinks that like a personality has motives for the way things turn out. This is the evolutionary impulse or eros or whatever is only to suggest that it is the character of reality that it does this, and that is because that is a character of reality, like the spirit of reality, or the way that reality tends to be always forever. Like, what is that besides metaphysical? What is that besides, like, is that mystical or not? It depends on whether that word means that to you, spiritual or not. But I'm not doing it. I'm not like generating the universe or whatever. So it seems like how I got here in the first place and everything is this tendency towards complexity, which is the character of the universe. The universe is not assumed to have any character whatsoever, but it appears to have a character. It appears to be doing what it's doing. So I mean, I'm a piece of the character of the universe. So the universe has a character, and we're not mythologizing that. The myth gives a name to the character of the universe. So I hope that I hope that that's something that you can even like work with, because I feel like it seems to me pretty cogent.
Which inserts telos into biology without evidence and demands belief before critique, which is basically circular reasoning. And he justifies it with this deep science injunction argument, which is basically Wilbur saying that you have to do the meditation before you're able to decide whether or not the claim is true. But that is not how science works. If you don't agree that it's a good test in the
Also, to be like nitpicky of both myself and this discussion, the thing that you're supposed to realize from meditating can happen without meditating, as like Vedanta would have it. It can happen, but the reason you meditate is to make it more likely to happen. So it's not like the states guarantee that you'll have non-dual realization, and you could argue too that it's not the purpose of them to get there, but they do seem to produce that effect more often. It seems to be like a garden for non-duality.
the first place. If you don't agree with the logic behind the test, then you're not going to agree with the results of the test. You can criticize if something is a good test before the test, and you can also criticize the results after you perform the injunction. And Wilber's deep science fails in both ways. Dr. Lane's critique is that Wilber's theology contradicts science. Wilber uses states as proof of spirit, and states are not good evidence to support this claim. Wilber centers Buddhist idealism as truth. Dr. Lane says that Wilber is smuggling teleology into evolutionary theory. Spiritual interpretations become ontological claims. Dr. Lane's conclusion is that Wilber is not offering a scientific alternative, he's offering a religious cosmology dressed in scientific language, and the integral community uncritically accepts this as cutting-edge theory when it's not. Dr. Lane ends by suggesting that if Ken Wilber wants to make these kinds of unfounded claims, that they should be framed honestly as religion, not fraudulently as science. This is Buddhist idealism in disguise.
Do you feel that Ken Wilber's books claim to be science? Like these are books about science that he puts on so there's the chess move, right? About science. Well, Wilber's a scientist. Wilber does science. That's his books. Theory of Everything. That's a book about science. It's a science book. I mean, come on. So, all right, yeah, like this guy obviously published a book. I doubt I'm gonna find that at Amazon, but it's probably good. You know, it probably has some good critiques. It's very clear, like the pattern here. All right, yeah, like evolution science, as I understand, like doesn't care why parameciums became humans. That's not really. It's like, well, it happened randomly. Okay, perfect. There you go. But it's like, why didn't it just stay parameciums forever? Well, because complexity, because this and that and this and that, and it just keeps happening over and over again. It's just an observation about the nature of reality. Like, I define it as there's these key moments where levels go meta, and you break into like a new type of level. I'm sure this isn't new to anyone here, but like the Big Bang, there wasn't anything, and now there's stuff, and then life on Earth in this case, in this instance. There wasn't life, now there is. And then conscious life, humanity, civilization, there wasn't a global communication network, now there is, right? So to me, that keeps happening, like that emergence keeps happening, suggests not an answer, but a question of why reality is designed in this way that does have a sort of developmental directionality to it. And that why would any developmental stage result in an improvement in any context? You know, why are we brought into a system that it's possible to develop out of at any point, you know, at any of those points? So totally bizarre about reality itself. And so we're just giving a name to that thing, whether someone then wants to say, oh, that's the God people we're talking about all this time. So that's a lively, wonderful discussion to have. That's a great, I like that discussion, and I approve of that discussion. I think it should happen more. But I really don't think it's what I'm doing, at least for my part. I don't really think that it's what Ken Wilber's doing either. I think it's a very different sort of thing. But I can see the comparison from the comparison of a strict, you know, materialist who's been raised with the belief that, like, oh yeah, There's nothing going on here. We're lost in space. This is just what's up. That's actually true too. That's also factually true. We're just here, and we've been here, and nothing's going to save us, and there's no problem with any of that. Everything's fine. That's also true. These are all true. But also, reality produced us here. So that's just weird. We're just commenting like that thing ought to have a name since it's such a key character in this equation. And the evolutionary biologist isn't focused on that and doesn't care about that. It isn't their topic. They're only looking at how life in particular changes towards better adaptation. I mean, obviously there's schools that go into different directions, but I mean, fundamentally, biological evolutionary theory covers the meta level of life, which is the changing of DNA towards different DNA for no reason, in no direction, right? But then beyond that, we get levels of structural attainment towards, why towards anything? Reality shouldn't include it towards, but towards beings that communicate, take over the world, and build spaceships and everything. That's just so weird that reality keeps doing that and will probably do it again. Weird thing about reality. I think it's worth noting about reality.
That if Ken Wilber wants to make these kinds of unfounded claims, that they should be framed honestly as religion, not fraudulently as science. This is Buddhist idealism.
So, yeah, it is what I just said, religion, or it's not science. I'm not saying it's science. I'm saying it's philosophy. This is a philosophy of reality. This is talking about what reality is and how it works. That's the claim. That's the real pre-chess move claim of integral theory.
In disguise, it's methodologically dishonest, epistemically conflationary,
and that's and this is why it's like I don't know if this guy does the move, but it's like just reading all the things that you just said. I'm getting the sense of a pretty uncharitable view of Wilber. So if I talk to him in person, he would probably say, I don't like Ken Wilber. Me, I don't have an opinion on Ken Wilber. I don't know the guy. He seems like a nice guy. I think he seems like a really nice guy. That's all I know. So that you get, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but you really get the sense this guy, he wrote a whole book calling integral theory religion. Okay. That's what your book's about. Why don't, I like what David's doing. Like in his book, does he move forward, or is this an entire book about like Wilber? Like, that's cool. I guess that's good. But I don't know. Maybe I ought to give it a read, I'll put it on my list.
And ontologically unjustified.
Frank Visser. I mean, well known in the Wilber community.
Who in the world
past,
read
I was
that
a huge
book?
fan. I think I did my share of Wilber promotion. I wrote a book, I created a website, I created the Wilber meetups. And over the past 6 or 7 years, I've distanced myself more and more from what I...
And to be fair, I do believe I've read Something Super Long by this guy. All right, so I do believe I've read Something Super Long by this guy.
See, it's a kind of integral circus. Very good at promoting a view, even a lifestyle, using the sales language and the political slogans that go with that. In the beginning, for 2 decades, I was really a Wilberian, if ever there was one, until I started investigating the fields he touches, especially the scientific ones. I see it now as a community who celebrates a certain body of ideas, but not in a very critical way. And that is strange because the claims and the statements made by Wilber and his students are meant to be scientifically valid. In my view, the culture around Wilber and integral is not a more sober and skeptical attitude that says, with every claim and statement made by Wilber, hey, is that really true? What do the experts say in a certain field? Can he get away with anything he says and writes? Is that enough authority?
Okay, wait, I was totally agreeing with everything he was saying, and I want to keep making sure that's true.
Valid. In my view, the culture around Wilber and integral is not a more sober and skeptical attitude that says, with every claim and statement made by Wilber, hey, is that really true? What do the experts say in a certain field? Can he get away with anything he says and writes? Is that enough authority to believe his ideas? I don't think so. Wilber
Can he get away with anything that he said? Yeah, so interesting, because David's going to challenge him, right? Like who else is going to? This is the thing, when you're the first, you need someone better to replace them, right? So Frank, I'm not talking to David anymore. Frank, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a business opportunity. I see it as Ken Wilber doing a good thing and being a good guy. I don't see that because he's not doing it better than he is. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see it as an opportunity. This is and it's every all the primary criticisms of Wilbur. I think this is where I stand with them. Like in all, this isn't a rejection of them. It's like, okay, I see where you're coming from, and I just don't agree that what you think is important is as important to me. They all seem to be people who get pretty involved with the community, and I haven't been involved with the community. So, I mean, look, that's
Science,
definitely
the
something to
areas of
consider.
biology and physics are relevant here. In biology, Wilbur is just a crypto creationist who has not even done his homework, and he tries to score his points as a politician with soundbites and slogans and ridicule. He has, I think, not even an interest in the field. For him, the only point that counts is that he can maintain there's a spirit behind everything. The very few things he has written about evolutionary theory are worse than an average creationist would dare to write, because Wilbur believes in his beloved eros in the cosmos, and that means a force behind the whole trend towards complexity and consciousness. From my side, I see that as begging the question big time.
I think would there not also be people who are like evolutionary scientists that find this idea very compelling? Like, because it seems like I don't know. Is that not also a thing? I mean, because to me, it's like a different question. I don't really find eros to be relevant to what biologists study.
Because that way you never have to explain how these things emerge. You just say there's a force behind it that does it. In science, that's a no-brainer. And even in complexity science, nobody would say that has any kind of validity as a cop-out. In fact, there are many interesting ways to explain the emergence of complexity, from the very small to the very large. And
Okay.
in no way do we need to resort to easy so-called explanations like...
So in that statement, everyone who criticizes Wilbur, just there's easy ways to explain the emergence of complexity without having to resort. Okay, that's where you tell me it. It's easy, right? Or it's simpler. It's simpler than Wilbur. I understand Wilbur, so tell me the simpler way to understand it that covers as much ground. That's all.
There's a spirit behind it. That is the end of science and the end of rationality. For me, this whole approach is very unfruitful that Wilbur has taken, and it shows him as a kind of spiritual ideologist who just wants to promote his idea that there an eros in the cosmos. The same goes for his dismissal of the famous second law of thermodynamics. Wilbur wants nothing about this. He just dismisses the second law and says there's a trend towards complexity and there's even a spirit behind that. Here again, he's completely out of touch with science. And that's really embarrassing. He should know better than that. A body of knowledge that is never questioned or never assessed and evaluated and has no open exchange of ideas back and forth about the validity of the ideas is doomed to become an ideology. So that is a really horrible situation, intellectually speaking. The level of abstraction.
So this is like what happens when I watch Fox News, and it's I don't know why that is, but I'm like sitting there, I'm waiting, I'm excitedly waiting for him to explain where the second law of thermodynamics contradicts Ken Wilber, but instead of that moment where he gives the argument, he just says it's wrong, it's stupid, it's bad, it's terrible, it's crazy, like Fox News. Like instead of when you're waiting for the point that he's making to come out, like, oh, then it just goes into, but it's wrong, it's bad, it's terrible, it's childish, it's stupid, it's juvenile, like, you know. And this is a pattern. This is a pattern I see in this context, in this particular context.
Abstraction is sometimes so high that you need to come down to the details and see if it holds true. And sometimes it doesn't. For example, I would prefer to see Wilbur write on integral biology, where he says, okay, there's Darwin, and we have Richard Dawkins, and then we have Stephen Jay Gould, and he says something else, and well, everybody is right, so how can we figure this out? I'd rather see that than say, okay, biology...
And the trap of it is that I would, like, so here it's like, well, just read his book and you'll understand how but no, it doesn't work. It doesn't happen that way. And I'll freaking do it since I'm making this claim, but like, I read the thing that he's referencing, that is his work or whatever that he's referencing, and it does the same thing he did in a longer form, but it doesn't make any other point besides what he's saying here, which doesn't make the point where Ken Wilber's contradicting the second law of thermodynamics, and that's a problem, and it's embarrassing, and anyone who knows either subject should notice this and have a big problem with it. So he's just calling me stupid. Like, maybe I am. Maybe the problem is that I'm stupid. Maybe that's the problem. All right, Frank Visser. But I'm listening to you, and I find it dubious when I'm feeling stupid, and the words I'm hearing are, well, because it's wrong, because it's stupid, because it's juvenile, because it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it's you know, these are these are level 3 and 4 words. These are like shamey words. These aren't compelling to level 5 and up.
That's the upper right quadrant. End of discussion. That's a classification game that is very popular at Integral. And critics have said Wilber overestimates the amount of consensus in a field. And when he thinks he picks the majority position, he actually picks a minority position. Integral is fine if you say, I integrate everything that matters. But if what you integrate perhaps does not matter, you can integrate all the fantasies you want. But it doesn't bring you the truth. He has been busy for a decade with his institute. Where is the result? The world cries out for this. I would love to see him just spend time on that and cut the socializing and the endless, I call this celebrity and I call that celebrity. I talk them into Integral. And in the end, we agree so much. Why? Disagree. That brings the clash and the insight and also the qualification. Like if Wilber says A and somebody says B, Wilber could say, well, perhaps it's not in all cases A. That's a qualification. That's refinement. Instead of saying, I can dismiss you because you're green or you're not qualified. All the more reason to have
Yeah,
close
this is a
reading
fair
of his
point.
work.
This is a fair
Instead
point.
of
Right?
letting him get away with anything he says. Because I value his program and I like his ideas, there is every reason to follow that closely and to just not be impressed by any authority, argument, or games he plays. Like we had a real problematic exchange on the internet. He really
Nobody's asking you to be impressed with Wilbur. He's just since you are, he's using that capital. Like I don't know that he like commands respect. It just seems like people throw it. It seems like he has all these kind of sycophants to me. It seems like there's a lot of people who love to get close to him in his life, in his personal life.
try to study the reading of his work instead of letting him get away with anything he says. Because I value his program and I like his ideas, there is every reason to follow that closely and to just not be impressed by any authority, argument, or games he plays. Like we had a real problematic exchange.
Yeah, see, I can agree with a lot of this. And I think they're good criticisms a lot of the time. They don't like bring me over the line where I would say I don't like Ken Wilber, but yeah, these are compelling arguments. Heard them before. I hear them again and again and again. They're compelling arguments. Mostly like he should do this instead of what he's doing. It would be better if he was this way. His work is incomplete. And these are all things he says about himself too. I mean, it's just an observation about reality again. On both sides of the argument, we're just observations of reality.
On the internet, he really tried to silence his critics. He's playing the game that he has figured it out and everybody else is stupid. Literally, it freezes. Wilber says, hey, you're not qualified to criticize because you are of a lower stage. Can you believe it? In no scientific debate will you find this. That's unfortunate because science or philosophy grows by debate, by listening to critics, even inviting not only those who agree. That's a bit the culture in the integral world. Like, hey, we agree.
And I mean, I think a good point you guys could bring up would be like, okay, Wilber, you're the guy who can judge whether people are like higher level or not, according to you, right? So you can do your integral level debate with your integral debate person or whatever, like whoever you think is competent enough to have to criticize your work. I wish that he would pick good critics of him and people that are really pointing out things in his work that he's got wrong, or I wish that he would engage with those people, and I think that he would. I don't know that Frank Visser is that. I'm not seeing that. Maybe
agree with each other. It's a kind of hall of mirrors. Like,
I mean, it would be good. I think it would be good. I think that would be a cool moment, like those two debating in public, and then what? Like Ken Wilber promotes it, Ken Wilber puts it up, or is this guy going to do it? Who's going to make that happen? Who's going to pay for it? And okay, but this is why it doesn't happen, right? So, but I would love that. I think that'd be a good thing, and I think he would raise good points, and I think you would finally get to see Wilber more directly responding to things like that. And I think that's why everyone's so mad, because that's not happening. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen. It probably won't happen, right? So what do you do with that? Like, devote your career to this? I don't know. Like, maybe that's a good idea for this guy. Probably it was a good idea for this guy. This is probably one of the bigger things he's done with his life. It's probably cool. Like, congratulations, Frank Visser. He's a cool guy, good thinker. And I'm glad finally get some people criticizing Ken Wilber.
Which is a good feeling. But listen to the people who don't agree with Integral. It could be another game to say, let's include the critics and see what happens. It's a man's game. We fight with theories.
Working deeply in developmentally informed education, and then played a role with the integral education community, standing that up, which was a kind of a subset.
Like, I guess what I'm saying, just from my armchair here, I feel like I have personal friends who I guess just because they're more of a third party and they don't care about all the community and everything, they would have better, like they've read 2 Ken Wilber books or whatever, and they're really smart and charismatic. They would have better criticisms of Ken Wilber and his work than Ken Wilber's critics. That's kind of that's the point I'm making. Like, I think I don't have those criticisms. I disagree with them. I do it all the time. We argue about it. But I think that just the general, like, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think that the best argument against integral theory is that it's pointless and that you don't need to know it and it shouldn't be a thing and it doesn't matter, things like that, where like, okay, maybe this is like true in some way, but like, who cares? What does it do for us? Those kind of arguments, I think, are the are the best arguments personally. Or no, like, also is level 5 just the last stage and now we're just making up a bunch of crap to understand what's going on? It's actually just goes up to level 5. Those are good arguments. Those are fun arguments, and they go to interesting places. I just kind of I space out a little bit and start changing the subject when it's like when it's about like personality and culture stuff, just because it's not really it's not my expertise. It's not something I'm that interested in.
Separate branch of Ken's Integral Institute in the kind of early 2000s. And then as a result of that work was actually recruited by one of only 2 sort of truly integral management consulting firms. We conducted a series of experiments over the better part of a decade on how do you bring integrally informed development, leadership, organization, and communication into high growth businesses. None of them worked.
Okay. How do you bring integral informed leadership, I think, into hybrid? Did you say hybrid businesses?
We conducted a series of experiments over the better part of a decade on how do you bring integrally informed development, leadership, organization, and communication into
development, leadership, organization, and communication. That was the part I didn't understand. That was all one stream. Into. Okay, so trying it on the ground. We're taking a pre-existing business, or okay, can't wait to see. This is cool. We're gonna make it integral. We're gonna introduce integral communication, organization, leadership, etc. into, please explain what?
High growth businesses. None of them
hybrid businesses. What is hybrid?
Development, leadership, organization, and communication into high growth businesses. None of them worked. And formed development.
Oh, high growth businesses. Okay.
Leadership, organization, and communication into high growth businesses. None of them worked. And neither did Integral Institute as a business. No one is branding their work, their movement, or ideas in that way these days. Ken's model, which he then kind of piggybacked to spiral dynamics, the idea that if you're even here at this conference or reading this book, aka one of us, you are, parenthesis, at least cognitively at second tier. I think that created far more problems than it solved. And it basically was like crack for Asperger's kids, getting a contact high from reading Ken's stuff and getting to see yourself on a map and position yourself up and away from, no matter what the disclaimers were. And there were plenty of disclaimers.
No, but you guys, you have to understand, like, when someone said that or it happened, it was like, oh God, that's crazy. If you're even here, you must be at level 7. Wow, what an interesting thought. I mean, it's a cart and a horse kind of situation. I feel like, like if you're even at a scientific convention, you're at least level 5. No, that's not true, right? But yeah, no, that's so funny. It is it's a magnet for certain kind of like certain types.
C was a parenthesis, at least cognitively at second tier.
So I really hope to know. No, this is so bogged down with, like, you need to know the preconditions. Like, you mean like a normal business? Because they don't work according to level 7. They aren't built in a level 7 way. The concept that we're working with here is a lower level deal. So introducing means growing other people up. Unless it doesn't, I don't know. You have to explain the setup pretty well.
I think that created far more problems than it solved. And it basically was like crack for Asperger's kids, getting a contact high from reading Ken's stuff and getting to see yourself on a map and position yourself up and away from, no matter what the disclaimers were. And there were plenty of disclaimers. The reality as that showed up in culture and in practice resulted in a bunch of dissociated eggheads masquerading as Jedi. And that, I think, was, part of the cracks in the foundation.
Sure.
Second tier men who are
but I don't think it's that common. I think that there's a lot of people who are looking for that thing, whether they're stalkers or they have some deep need to be something, they're looking for their identity or their thing. I don't feel like they're that attracted to Ken Wilber in particular. I know that can definitely happen, but I feel like there's so many other better ways to go with that energy. that don't require as much work. But yeah, no, this is this is a thing, guys. This is a thing.
Balanced in their embodiment and their absolute lack of backbone and conviction. I'd rather deal with blue, honor, duty, courage, sacrifice men who recognize that there is in fact something bigger than their own experience or process to live and die for. And then you're just like, that's awesome. Now can we expand what it is?
There is something bigger than
honor, duty, courage, sacrifice men who recognize that there is in fact something bigger than their own experience or process to
there is something bigger than their own experience or process. Okay.
live and die for. And then you're just like, that's awesome. Now can we expand what it is you bow down to, versus trying to find men who are so about counting the angels on the head of a pin that their balls and their backbone are nowhere to be found. Because of Ken's broad sweep, because of his synthetic analysis of a lot of disciplines, and because of the confidence bordering on hubris with which he held forth and proclaimed the nature of things, if somebody hadn't done their own primary research and wasn't deeply versed in the disciplines that he was presuming to speak of, they took his synthesis and analysis as gospel and never went back and did the hard work of reading the original sources and drawing their own opinions or triangulating between other experts and leaders in those given disciplines. We've all got our biases, so we for sure can only become more of what we are. He was a Eastern non-dual meditator, so out of all
okay,
traditions,
yeah, I really wish that this would get into the setup and the outcome. So all I know about that is that it was a massive failure, and so I'm like curious, like, okay, how did that go? Why? So I can think critically about myself. But instead I'm being told how to interpret something that I'm not aware of, you know. He's like, which is fine. I'm getting what he's saying, you know, like, okay, this totally doesn't work.
wildly privileged, those
That we're just going to talk like more and more about things that aren't that, you know.
we all come in through certain doorways, but as he justified for sure, we can only become more of what we are. He was a Eastern non-dual meditator, so out of all traditions, he wildly privileged those. We all come in through certain doorways, but as he justified those to the exclusion of other things, when all you got to hammer everything looks like a nail, spiral dynamics sort of firmly jumped the shark when Ken changed the colors to align with the chakras. That would be the place I would back it off from. It lost.
Why? What do you mean? Why? That see, he lost you when he changed the colors to align with, but you know that the colors didn't matter, right? That they don't matter, right? It doesn't matter what the colors are. So I guess because the vibe of that, but chakras, I guess from this guy's perspective, chakras are a useless concept, I should imagine, unless they aren't. I don't know. You don't. Yeah. Okay.
All of its nuance and most of its usefulness by the time it got simplified into the versions that most people are conversant with today. There's been lots of solid and methodical breakdowns of.
Because I actually, that was something that when it first was introduced to me, I was like, whoa, really? What? And then I looked into it and I was like, oh, okay, weird. Like chakras have been telling a sort of mythical story about, no, I don't want to say mythical. I just want to say like, it's been looking at a developmental progression in some cases in this rainbow way, but pertaining only to like the body and a specific type of somatic comprehension or experience. And, like, again, this would lead to the assumption, which he's going to tell me is wrong, this would lead to the assumption that he doesn't understand the thing to understand about chakras, like why they're valuable, what it means from an integral perspective, how it is a developmental map of like reality, but in the case of chakras as a messy kind of metaphor that is practical to certain approaches, but not to philosophy very much. It's not a very philosophical idea.
Of where integral theory got out over its skis, specifically its orienting generalizations and presuming to define entire academic.
Somatics is always going to be, I don't know if I'm not allowed to call it transrational, but somatics doesn't want to do what you want to think makes the most sense. And that's why we get so caught up in somatic illness, is because the thing that seems like the thing you ought to do, it might be unhealthy, right? So, I noticed this really as a singing teacher, like the way that you tell people to do something somatically, it makes no literal sense, but they'll get it, breathe all the way down to your toes. You get it. Why did that work? You obviously didn't do that. You know how lungs are. Somatics are weird, but yeah, chakras make a ton of sense. The rainbow doesn't really make sense to me. I never really understood why chakras are colors, but a developmental spectrum, that rainbow is a metaphor for the developmental spectrum, and the spectrum behaves like a spectrum, so cool, interesting analogy. also easy to remember at least the order of colors, if not the names. It was a little bit harder to get the names after Spiral Dynamics.
Disciplines with a certain straw man that then get knocked down. So there's critiques within the frameworks, and that's been done. One of the biggest problems, like neo-Vedanta.
Because I've been sitting here for like a incredibly amazing power session, I'm going to check the comments again. They're probably all gone by now, right? Just anyone agreeing with me feels I'm on the right track. Is my question worthy enough for noticing? Oh, gee, I'm sorry. That was a while ago, I think. Okay, cool. So nobody's here. Yeah, it's super late. I think, which is good. I just wanted to kind of finish this so I can edit it down. And anyone watching this after the fact, good to see you. I don't know if anyone's here or not, and that's fine either way. I just wanted to make this video, and I need to start planning ahead for these, but I'm just having so much fun right now. And this is about all I can muster. So jumping back in.
The idea that the world is illusory, it's all in your mind, and just changing your mind is going to change everything. Where Ken lost the most relevance, other than the collapse of Integral Institute, was for him to be discussing glibly chakra systems or subtle energy or things that are very far off the reservation of even skeptical enthusiasts, and discussing them as if they are established facts. That to me is problematic. You're like, okay,
yeah, this is a huge marketing problem. I struggle with this as well. It's like, wow, if you don't introduce any of the kind of somatic or spiritual or stuff from other cultures, you don't run into that misunderstanding as much, for sure.
Any efforts to maintain relevance is really important to distinguish between what is regressive and just going back to kind of magical thinking, and what is
I mean, let's
progressive.
face it, like a big part of the hook of Wilbur was the New Age movement and disillusionment with the New Age movement. And that's kind of like, it's turned into something else. It's turned into just it's turned into a lot of different things, right? That was kind of the bus I feel like he was riding on, and it's kind of over. It's something else that he's not very compatible with currently. So I just think it's a natural thing. I don't think it's a failure. I think it's just like he rode a wave and got really big.
We're truly stepping into some increasingly complex and helpful new ways of looking at stuff. Somewhere between the non-dual, the psychological, is the span where Ken had the least vision, and that was the messy human parts of how we get this done together,
Sure.
and the way we inform and are informed by each other. As soon as it devolves in any way, shape, or form to exclusive claims of wokeness, abiding and unchallengeable access to source, that's when any emergence collapses. I think spirituality is wildly overrated, and I think our core humanity is wildly underrated. And so the teachers that I can get behind, folks who are like, this is it, this is us. And
the point, as I understand from the this point is insane from a non-dual perspective, right?
And that was the messy human parts of how we get this done together, and the way we inform and are informed by each other. As soon as it devolves in any way, shape, or form to exclusive claims of wokeness, abiding and unchallengeable access to source, that's when any emergence collapses. I think spirituality is wildly overrated, and I think our core humanity is wildly underrated. And so the teachers that I can get behind, folks who are like, this is it, this is us, and get used to it. And the way out is through. The way out is down and in, not up and away. Those experiences just
down and in, not up and away. That's just a prejudice, man. What?
And are informed by each other. As soon as it devolves in any way, shape, or form to exclusive claims of wokeness, abiding and unchallengeable access to source, that's when any emergence.
Yeah, and so this is an argument I hear a lot, and I don't I'm gonna stop making this at some point. I'm just gonna stop doing this one. But all right. From like a non-dual realization, what has happened is that you now directly know and see that a thing that you've always thought was the truth actually isn't the truth. So from that perspective, what it just said, not what I just said, because it's wrong. I'm doing it wrong. I don't have a non-dual realization. But as I understand, from that perspective, you've corrected a misunderstanding that you had before. It's not elevating that belief above other beliefs. It's a direct, oh, holy cow, I was confused this whole time, and now I've just understood the nature of reality much better. and particularly that I had this fundamental misunderstanding of being an isolated self. When people say all this, I want to know where they stand in reference to that. They can simply say that, well, I don't think that. That's totally wrong. But then it's like, well, then you're not talking about Ken Wilber's work, I don't think. Like, this isn't a response to that if you're not familiar with that, or you don't have anything to say about that, or it's not, because like, yeah, yeah, I've been at this moment a few times. Like, it is a fully acceptable position to not believe in a non-dual realization, and it begs the question then for those who do not have a non-dual realization, and those who do, and those who would like to tell me how to understand it so that I also see things not from a non-dual way, fully understanding why that is more true than how I understand reality currently. And this is what as I understand, this is what a spiritual teacher essentially does, is they show you how to get past that misunderstanding you have with yourself and get to a non-dual comprehension of reality, that the separate self is not real, as I understand. Because even AI can tell that when I say things like that I haven't had the experience, and so like almost everyone in the world, right? Or that I'm not a non-dual perspective myself. So I just want those people. I want to hear what those people would say about this discussion personally. That would be of most interest to me.
Collapses. I think spirituality is wildly overrated, and I think our core humanity is wildly underrated. And so the teachers that
I think that statement, it's true, like from Integral's perspective too. Like it's wildly so Integral just sees as spirituality is overrated for the wrong reasons and underrated for the wrong reasons, right?
Behind folks who are like, this is it, this is us, and get used to it, and the way out is through, the way out is down and in, not up and away.
But
those experiences.
So in that perspective I see as anti-spiritual. That is a perspective which is saying, don't pursue spirituality, don't just goodness is spirituality, right? Just whatever thing you value is spirituality, right? Have a good time, be energetic, right? Be positive. Isn't that kind of what you're saying?
Get used to it, and the way out
be tough, get used to it, struggle through it. This is the game. That's fully compatible with this, but I think that's just a rational, pragmatic perspective on life. I don't think it has anything to do with spirituality, personally. So I think it's weird to call that spiritual.
The way out is down and in, not up and away. Those experiences.
And when you say down and up, you have to explain what those directions mean, because they're metaphorical mythology.
Feel more honest, and we don't end up in the schizoid effort to reconcile the utter tragedy that is the human experience with all of these ascendant so-called spiritual states or experiences. The feedback loops I haven't seen Ken being open to it, and I think there's legitimate peevishness on his part, clearly got increasingly hijacked and reactive. At some point, you take a swipe at the ankle biters. The critiques of Ken that are just inflammatory, reactionary, don't get it, caricature, typecast, yeah. But
it's not as though he's like, I mean, in terms of like public figures or thinkers, philosophers responding, pop philosophers responding to critics, let's say, or new age philosophers responding to critics, it's not as though he's the most acerbic of them. I guess from these guys' perspective, it was surprising how persnickety he can get, but I don't think there's any way to call it like extremely irritable or like he's mean to his critics or anything. It's dismissive is the kind of the term.
The critiques of Ken are just inflammatory, reactionary, don't get it, caricature, typecast, yeah. But the considered open-hearted critiques have to be met with something more than you just don't understand the model or you're misinterpreting.
Talking about Integral, it's
I think that guy is at least not doing the due diligence with integral theory. So yeah, I wouldn't, if I were Ken Wilber, I wouldn't take him seriously. If I was Adam, I would take him seriously because I have time for that. But if I was Ken Wilber, I would not take that guy seriously.
It's something wondrous, but there's also something about it which makes it in many contexts more or less unusable. That's the bit
Wait, sorry.
which
Okay,
makes
this
it
is all
in
this is going to be.
many
Okay.
contexts more or less unusable. That's the position more and more people are coming to, and then people are either trying to clean out the gravel or they're trying to make a new milkshake. I worked with it for years, and all of those things happened in the years that followed. Stuff that Wilbur had said and done, or there were these incidents with cults. I also discovered there were gaps to fill here, or ways to update
Ooh, there were these incidents with cults.
this theory, especially if we want to use it for changing the world. And most of all, it repelled non-spiritual people, and not for such a bad reason, given that this stuff grew in and through the New Age community, and it still carried that DNA. People were attracted to Integral often because Integral was a ticket to make their spiritual journeys and intuitions more legit in a modern, rational, secular society. Many of the Integralist followers were in it specifically for that ingredient. So when I tried to build a political movement in Sweden around these things, and Denmark a little bit, things got fairly New Agey pretty quickly and very focused on the inner dimensions. People were drawn to this stuff for its focus on the inner dimensions. So many people are there to fulfill this particular need. When you then go, okay, let's look at the system side, they nod, but after a while they get bored with it. And they say, okay, sure, but when do we do the real stuff? The meditation. Meditation is the legit part, but from there on, they want to go farther. And before long, you're sitting there arguing with people about certain forms of magical thinking. There's this sense that we all have, people who are spiritually inclined, that transformation is possible, including radical transformation.
Okay, just to show that I'm like paying attention to him, I've spent a lot of time, a lot of just kind of spiritual communities, and I've found that like, the Wilbur people are the least like that of all of them. It's a tendency because you get these people together, they're very open and vulnerable, and they meditate and they want to share their own insights, and they have a traveling teacher or whatever. It just develops into a overall like woo-woo touchy-feely thing when it's designated like a spiritual event. But I found like the Integral people are the least that way. In fact, like me as a representative, I'm like always like, to me the whole spirituality just comes down to spiritual state realization and how that has relationship to all the other aspects of your life in a lot of ways. Yeah. So like meditation, for me, it's like, okay, meditation's done. I guess I should talk to these people, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at with it. And then that's what happens. So it becomes really touchy-feely woo-woo.
Spiritual practice with deep psychological underpinnings are real. This was a very, very strong realization for me. But what I noticed around communities, wow, but you're this integral person, right? You work through your shadows and you can take all of these multiple perspectives. But after years and years working with people on it's like, wait a minute, you guys are all the same as the kind of people I grew up with and I'm used to. It's the same old humanity. I guess just my expectations had gone up too much. But when it got down to it, it was just the same old.
And I'm curious if he's saying that he was better than those people or the same as those people.
Dynamics, power struggles, just in other guises and sometimes more vicious guises. So all of this together got me from being really, really, really an acolyte of sorts to being a reformed Protestant or something of the integral church. Metamodernism is a stripped down sociopolitical integralism. And roughly speaking, it's a more conservative integralism. It's more reformist rather than to be new age-ishly in your face aesthetically, not necessarily married to certain developmental models,
That's
also with greater openness to non-developmentalists. And we're part of this research project as well that tries to bring together meta-theorists and meta-theories, still trying to find its feet and defining its direction. But I think metamodernism may not actually be the vehicle for the future of real meta-theory discipline. Metamodernism is, of course, a commentary on a certain cultural vibe and a certain stage, etc. And I think the next torchbearer for that kind of thing would be the creation of some kind of transdisciplinary meta-theoretical discipline, which has academic standards, but at the same time manages to be as holistic and comprehensive as integral.
Yeah, and well, this is a good place to get to is what does academic standards mean in this context?
Yeah. It will try to be, but it isn't necessarily about metamodernism. I don't think there are almost any self-identified integralists anymore. That kind of movement that was fairly monolithically.
Let's see. Am I a self-identified integralist? No. I think no. Am I a self-identified integralist? Let's even say ist. I'm ooh, I don't like the ist thing, I guess. It's like being a fan. Am I an integralist? Am I a fan of integral theory? Like I would self-describe that I think Ken Wilber's books are true and important, and I would probably recommend reading Ken Wilber over any other philosophy author for a person that I found intelligent and I had a lot of respect for. That's what I'd say of that.
Following Wilbur that existed 15 years ago or 10 years ago almost doesn't exist anymore. It has failed. If the project is this particular brand to kind of find its way into the center of human thinking and there begin to integrate all strands of human thoughts and knowledge in a productive, actionable manner, then it did fail. Integral was kind of a point where everything kind of came together in one person, in one setting, etc., and then kind of explodes in many, many, many different directions, some of which go really south. So,
see, and Daniel Gortz, I feel like this is where you failed. You were those people that came together to be the integral level, right? We're like scapegoating the guy who wrote the books about it. But this is a thing I circle around a lot here with critics of Ken Wilber and Integral.
Cults.
Like try and do it and come back and say what happens. I feel like Ken Wilber kind of did that. He tried to do it and came back and said what happened. Like that's kind of what I'm asking Level 7 to do, and do better than Ken Wilber, darn it.
Far-right stuff, lonely people being in telepathic communication with Wilbur via YouTube, UFOs, integral Nazis, psychedelic Nazis, what the fuck, etc., etc., etc. We may need to, at this point, not be too inclusive. We need to, I think, move towards stronger discernment. My old self would have said, oh, that's interesting. Good on you. You think that's interesting? Go and see where it takes you. Now I say, be very careful. You might be harming yourself and other people, including your family, if you go farther in this direction. You are opening up, not Alice's Wonderland, just a rabbit hole, and it goes to kind of spirituality. We're talking poison.
Well, that's just good old-fashioned conservatism.
Chalice, right? It's not even a chalice. You threw away the chalice. You're up to here, right, in the poison. That sort of shit is awful, and we need to...
Don't read books about witchcraft or watch horror movies, and don't play violent video games, all right?
Very, very careful not to contribute to those sorts of things. And that's why I think the future really is better theory.
And no pornography. Now I'm serious. No pornography for any of you guys. It's very unhealthy and bad for you. Pornography. And it's exploitative and hurts women and others.
In terms of future developments of meta theory, there are significant updates possible to Wilber's theories. The new kind of prism that needs to emerge is a more thorough and more careful meta theory. I think there's some kind of cosmic battle to be had for the soul of Integral. The marriage of sense and soul, right? They're not married.
Yeah, but you're not. That's mythology. It's not what's really going on. So, like, we can talk like this. Yeah, fine. A battle for the soul of integral theory. What's the problem?
They're dating, and it's on and off. And sometimes soul has a huge affair. Senses expands. If we want to drink from pure,
this guy believes the soul is literally real. This guy's the, mythology.
We need to not fool ourselves, and people are fooling themselves. Like I talk to respected integralists, and they will say, "So my next big project is I'm going to research the number of the dates you're born and how that influences your life." There's no research to the frontier, and really where we can
always
see
a
soul
fascinating
energies working,
subject,
etc. And it's like, it's not real. It's just not real. You're
probably, I seriously doubt it's real.
People in the integral community, we have a problem. As long as those things exist in substantial amounts and are integral to integral, its promise cannot be fulfilled. Intelligent people will walk in the door, they'll get a whiff of some of that, they'll go look elsewhere for meaning in life and for integration of
in some place that I've seen, Wilber outright dismisses well, he doesn't outright dismiss, but astrology, basically he had a statement on it, which is that it must be understood to be like there is no rational perspective that the positions of the planets and celestial bodies has any influence on any direct, via the means suggested by astrology that has any influence on anything. So he has said that. Now, people in his community, are they like bringing in astrology to? Of course, like New Age. Lots of people are into astrology. Like it's a very, very common thing to be interested in. And should that somehow be included in integral theory, I'd be interested to see how that could be done, because I don't know a whole lot about it. It seemed to me to be a thing that wasn't true, so I never really put much stake in it. I have had people explain a lot of it to me and go over my birth chart and everything, and I kind of fall back to that. It's not real. It's not. It's cool. It's interesting, but it's not real. It's a game, right? And I feel like Ken Wilber has expressed that sentiment in his writing, which is kind of where I'm considering canonical, I suppose.
Of knowledge. Next level models, pure theory or meta theory models. That I think is the real future of the real integral, the real marriage of sense and soul.
So the kinds of branding and marketing that have been associated with Ken Wilber's kind of integrative pluralism has been a little bit too positive, futuristic, American, feel good, clean. And that sets up a dichotomy so that when there are normal human problems.
Wait, I think this might be a super dope point, actually. Hang on, do that again.
So the kinds of branding and marketing that have been associated with Ken Wilber's kind of integrative pluralism has been a little bit too positive, futuristic, American, feel good, clean. And that sets up a dichotomy so that when there are normal human problems, it seems like it undermines.
That's super interesting. I think I like this dude's point here. And how are you going to ruin it, layman?
I've seen that all around me in individuals relative to the feeling of what their practice and what their beliefs mean about them, that they're at the leading edge of evolution. They start to get into this culture where you can't help but become fragile and crash when you've got that kind of distortion. When I came into the community, I thought, oh, this is an example of something. When I talked to Ken Wilber,
yeah,
distortion.
That's a Fox News move, like distortion. You just said that, and that's the word to explain. That's the word that was weird and colorful, right? To explain that word, right? Distortion, because you just described the perspective, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's
their practice and what their beliefs mean about them, that they're at the leading edge of evolution, and they start to get into this culture where you can't help but become fragile. And
see, because I don't think it's distortion in the sense like, okay, this is true, but this the marketing and the community play it up like, oh, you should really be proud of yourself, and I think so too. I think you should be proud of yourself. If you're interested in self-development in the first place, or health, or any of that, I think you should be proud of yourself. So unfortunately, that comes with this shadow thing. So now, like, not integral is shadow, and lower levels is shadow, and no states is shadow, right? That's just a thing people will naturally do, create like a pecking order out of, and that's obviously acknowledged. This is why Green Meme doesn't like levels, because they are hierarchical. There are some people that are further and less far along in this process. My approach to that is to say, we don't look down on children. We love children. They're our favorite. Your children are your favorite. Like, it's not a problem to be at a lower level in anything. It's fine. It's wonderful. It's welcome. We it's the higher levels you got to look out for. But being at a higher level is an accomplishment. Sometimes a lot of it was kind of other people moving you, and sometimes you really did it on your own. So congratulations for any of that stuff. Maybe the non-dual realization happened to you spontaneously, and in that case, shame on you. And if you had to work really hard to arrive at that, or you're still working and you never arrived at that, then, congratulations. I applaud your efforts. Trophy of participation. I believe in that. I think you deserve it, and you're worth it.
Crash when you've got that kind of distortion.
But I'm a goonie, man. Like, I'm a dark person, like, I think there's a lot of people who kind of like, I think Stuart Davis wears it pretty well as like a artistic representation of that old integral community. Is like, he's a pretty dark person, and I felt a lot of I felt like his work deepened Ken Wilber's work a lot, because there's that real dark side to it that I identify with more, the real struggle and abandonment, and not measuring up, all this kind of shadow stuff that comes along with an integral worldview. Very interesting stuff.
The community, I thought, oh, this is an example of something. When I talked to Ken Wilber a few months ago, I said to him, you're the mark to beat. The future of this kind of thinking has to be at least as good as what you did.
Yeah.
But that means that I'm thinking of a space in which people are doing this, and he's an example of that. One of the first things that I needed to do when I became associated with the community was to distinguish between what I called integralists and integralites. And so there are people who have these ideas and identify with them regardless of what their internal situation is. And there's other people who have found these things in themselves, people who have their own vision, logic, experience, whether they've ever heard of these ideas or not. So which one do we think is the real integral community, right? Ultimately, it's got to be the one that isn't just the branded organization. Once you start thinking about that, you realize that the theory itself tells us that this should be the case. And I found that was one of the limitations, is that people don't often apply the ideas of the theory to themselves or to the community. Wilbur's attempt to clarify and popularize this was an excellent attempt, but it's failed. I think there is a role for creative divergence and reconsolidation, and we have to get that
Well,
right.
I became aware of it due to its existence, so it didn't fail there.
In various ways, in theory, and then also in the communities. We have to manage both of those. I also think there's something about a sort of as you sow, so shall you reap in the ethos that Wilbur's temperament brought to all of this. And one of the things he does is he likes to be casually dismissive. He likes to push off against things. This is integralism, and that was the postmodern cul-de-sac, right? And you kind of exaggerate the degree of difference. We don't have to worry about that one because we've got this one now. And I think that spreads through the community so that people naturally start to do that to him as well. You go, well, that was the problematic integralism. This is integral 2.0 or something like that. Not to pick on David Long, because I think as off-putting to some people as David Long might be, that attempt to draw a really clear distinction about being at least rational, at least modern in the way we think about this is very important. But I think he's also an
dudes,
example.
We're dickering over what at least rational means. Like nobody's denying that point. That's what's annoying. That's the trick right there. You know, we all agree that transrational means at least rational. We're having disagreements about what is and isn't transrational and what we can use that word for. That wasn't a word. Like who the hell says transrational? Very, very few of us, right?
Of a general mood in the community where people feel like in order to secure some space for themselves and what they think is important, they have to push off against Wilbur. And I think Wilbur was doing that as well. He felt like a lot of his writing
and that's my point here. Why do people think that? Who the hell? You don't read a philosophy author to go over to their house and become their friend. Like I've never thought of it that way. That's a weird thing to me. Like it may have crossed my mind to like write a letter to Wilbur at one point or something, but it's not a thing I've ever done, you know, and now it's like not even possible. So weird to me, you know, the getting involved with it being seen as like a natural like next step.
Marginalized Wilbur. And I think Wilbur was doing that as well. He felt like a lot of his writing sounds like marginalizing denouncements of other groups of people. And that's understandable if you're trying to clarify a difference. But it also sets up an attitude that people will buy into going forward. All the metatheists are doing is saying, here are the things you shouldn't leave out. Critical thinking is one of them. And then when you have
the entire green meme gets that treatment in Integral, right? I mean, it's an anti-green meme and anti-first tier sentiment that would be typical, you know, to at least to the extent of being trans to them, right?
As a tool of thought, but also as a basis for communication with people. It's much easier for that discussion to say, well, what are we leaving out? Is our social organization with each other somehow primitive? Or are we not being critical enough? These kind of models at the level we're talking about have to make it clear that when two people say the word God, they might be talking about vastly different things. And we need to be looking at how they're having that discussion. And that line blurs constantly. This could be pre-rational nonsense, or you could be talking to a very interesting person who's got a transrational take, and you don't know until you really get into it with them which way they're leaning. It's very appropriate to do those explorations, but it's also appropriate to be cautious about that. And you have to be careful with it. There's a need for a new kind of hygiene. Here's where we all need to develop a wisdom of defense against cognitive biases and manipulators and a marketing culture and technological algorithms, because all kinds of things are trying to hack us. And how do we know the difference between our inspired, intuitive, experiential connections and just being hacked by ourselves or someone else or the system? So that's going to be increasingly serious each day we go forward. We have to really take that seriously. General question of exclusion and inclusion and how you set that membrane up and how you establish community spaces that are as inclusive as possible. But
this is the key question, exclusion. Yes.
Don't include the things that endanger people and undermine the space, and how you allow the space to take hits and be anti-fragile by growing in response to not trying to control everything, but at the same time, establish real boundaries in order to establish a particular ethos in a particular space.
Yeah.
These are really open-ended questions that Integral has suffered through, and we're all going to keep suffering through as we try to refine the skill of how to do that. There's the theory aspect and the culture aspect. Which elements in Wilbur's model of integral pluralism might be problems? I have some real issues around the way states and stages are deployed. I have some real issues around the way the second tier is conceptualized.
States and stages and second tier. Sure. Okay.
Some of these things may have to be changed to stop producing the kinds of outputs we've been seeing. And I think also there's been a tendency to not understand and not make clear the difference between, say, integration and blurring. There need to be very careful membranes around that so that we don't think experimental blending and integrating gives you freedom to just blur the differences between all these zones. But we need to police that a little bit better.
Fusion and differentiation, I think we all get that.
Have a theory that empowers us to do that.
I started off as a seeker, and I was interested in psychedelics as a doorway into direct experience, especially of Eastern Enlightenment. I've made my way in the world primarily teaching yoga.
I liked layman Pascal. I don't know. I need to go a little deeper with him. I think he's being very generous in this take, but yeah, I agreed with all that. I thought those were good points. I don't know. They didn't do. I mean, didn't really. I agree. They're cool.
Experience, especially of Eastern Enlightenment. I've made my way in the world primarily teaching yoga since I was in my early 20s, also teaching meditation, also as a body worker. So I'm very much in the daily experience of mind-body awareness practice, both in terms of my own practice and in terms of facilitating for others. In my young 20s, I came across Ken's work. I started with The Spectrum of Consciousness and continued down that track, reading several of his books in my 20s. I was a Ken Wilber evangelist for many years, probably for at least a decade. There just started to be some places where I felt like this is not adding up as much for me anymore. That eventually leads me into the place where I'm having conversations with people like David. I think there's really just some key points where we feel like the integral model and integral community took some wrong turns and headed off in a direction that doesn't make sense to me anymore, even though it may have at some point. As I intersected with the integral community more over the years, I started to find that when I would meet people who were really into integral in the real world and think, oh, we're going to have this great connection. The notion was if you can talk about second tier turquoise yellow conceptually, somehow that means that you're there. And so what I started to notice is that there were a lot of people I was interacting with who would talk about transrational high levels of spiral dynamics and would basically be repeating a lot of very new agey, very magical thinking, mythic literalism, quasi-religious set of beliefs, but talking about them with this new language. So there's some sort of translation into this new framework. So a lot of those pre-trans distinctions, this is one of the things that I know David is talking about and that I'm really interested in too, seem to get sort of glossed over in the interest of like, let's all just say we're part of this new club where we have this cool vocabulary and we're sort of intellectual new agers, and I'm not down with that. Part of where integral runs into trouble for me is that there can be a tendency to overprivilege upper left experiences. If someone were to come along and say, no, I had this experience and this experience is proof of this interpretation. How do we navigate that bridge between profound experience and what we assert that experience means with much more care and rigor, while understanding that the desire to do that is not based in devaluing the experience. It's based in taking the experience seriously and saying we need to have.
So, and it's so interesting how consistent these points are that I can kind of respond the same way to all of them. It's like we needed this step to get to where we are now, and now we're criticizing the steps that we've taken before. But it's not. It's to devalue that we took that step in the first place. That this is a gateway to this understanding. For this is so far the only extant gateway to this understanding.
Have a nuanced, sophisticated fluency in the language of the inner life such that we can speak about it coherently and not fall into self-indulgent, ego-inflated, overly literal interpretations of what the experience means. That bridge is something of a tightrope, and it's a very easy one to fall off of. There's an ideal.
Gosh, maybe what I'm feeling is that like all of these, like I don't know, like I think it might be not as enjoyable for me that like all these people kind of see themselves as in like a camp of some sort, you know, like I just find these, it's like Julian Walker went into all these places that he assumed the people there should be more like him, and it sounds like they weren't. And so now he's thinking the whole thing was like a lure for people like him that wasn't actually meant for people like him. It's a disappointment for people like him. But it sounds like what he had hoped would be there was people like me and David. Okay, well, gee, sorry that happened to you, and sorry I wasn't there, you know? Right? I mean, of course there's going to be like lame people at some things, according to you. That's how it goes. Yeah, I guess it must have been disappointing to get involved with this community and find that people weren't as like you as you wanted. But to me, that just rings more true that like I really yearn for genuine level 7 connection, I guess. To me, that's what that says. It doesn't make. Yeah, again, so we're talking about the problems with the culture, and to me, I'm trying to now not talk about the problems with the theory in that context anymore. So that'll help make what I say more brief.
These paths, Eastern philosophy and practice, that I was very prone to as well, where it's very easy to become convinced that there's an ultimate enlightenment experience, there's an ultimate non-dual awakening, there's an ultimate dissolution of the ego, there's a merging with spirit, capital S, that can happen if you are the dedicated, heroic meditator who really goes there and does the work. There will be.
Yeah, and so I think that is true, that can happen, and I don't. And I think it's not if you go there, but that makes it more likely. And I think that's the integral perspective. Yeah.
This great reward. And when that great reward gets framed as an ultimate absolute truth about the nature of reality, about the purpose of the cosmos, about
Yes. And I do purpose of, yeah, I think it's those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
your face before the Big Bang, as sophisticated and beautiful as it is, as much as I identify with that heroic quest, it's as much a revelatory claim that has a religious underpinning as anyone else can make. It doesn't matter how beautiful and sophisticated the context is, if you ultimately end
But what you're saying, you do or don't agree with it?
up with this revelatory religious claim, something still needs to be worked through as far as I'm concerned. Joseph Campbell became really, really pivotal, and I devoured everything I could from Joseph.
Yeah, I think it does. The non-dual experience is experienced by the individual as this great spiritual. So I think it does seem that way to the person in that state, or having that realization, or who has had that realization. And so it seems like it should be seen that way from the perspective of someone who has not had that. Right?
Campbell for a long time, precisely because he was saying, okay, there's this mythopoetic domain of human experience and human culture that shows up everywhere. And so what does that say? Does that therefore say that all of these myths must be literally true? Or does it say that there is a symbolic, metaphorical language, that there's an aspect of our psyches and our brains that is structured in this way, where we make sense of the primordial, sacred aspects of our experience through this kind of language?
And it's a subtle point, but I think that there's a misunderstanding of the non-duality of the quadrants, that like,
where we make sense of the primordial, sacred aspects of our experience through this kind of language. And it's beautiful and profound and worth the primordial state of our psyches and our brains that is structured in this way, where we make sense of the primordial, sacred aspects of our experience through this kind of language. And it's beautiful and profound and worth exploring, but it's worth exploring in a way where we're saying, let's get fluent in this specific language and not literalize it and generalize it outside of the quadrant that it belongs in. Over time, I've moved from being someone who
wait, I had a thing
of human experience and human culture that shows up everywhere. And so what does that say? Does that therefore say that all of these myths must be literally true? Or does it say that there is a symbolic, metaphorical language, that there's an aspect of our psyches and our brains that is structured in this way, where we make sense of the primordial, sacred aspects of our experience through this kind of language? And it's beautiful.
What? Wait, what? I thought
Domain of human experience and human culture that shows up everywhere. And so what does that say? Does that therefore say that all of these myths must be literally true? Or does it say that there is a symbolic, metaphorical language, that there's an aspect of our psyches and our brains that is structured in this way, where we make sense of the primordial, sacred aspects of our...
And yes, okay, I think I'll finally circle back to it. Everything that we understand of any sort, anything that we know or have read, goes through that psychological apparatus until we learn better, until we see that, even as we do, it continues to do that, right? Everything that we know, we assume to not be of a psychological nature, and it reveals to us more and more that, in fact, because your brain works this way, in this magic making, in this mythologizing way, because your brain works that way, you have generated a reality using those tools that, if you like, must be dispelled. And the dispelling is these states of consciousness, right? So that's I wish that we were closer in terms of do we describe this stuff so differently that it's almost hard to even put his thoughts into my language. But I like the general things he's saying. It's just that I think that I don't know about Campbell, but that meme, the Campbell style of thinker, I think it's to recognize that the way you understand physical concepts, like gravity, the Big Bang, and the universe, are constructed of the parts of myth, because your brain is a myth machine. You're to some extent a myth, and all the knowledge that you have is colored in this way that makes sense to human beings. It's twisted and contorted and distorted in this way that makes sense to human beings, and that's just ordinary. That's just how everyone is, and we all see things slightly differently even within that. And the non-dual is to see that going on directly, right? It's to see that that is a construction of the mind from the perspective of itself. You see that, I guess. So yeah, that's like really mind-blowing to know that like you've been seeing everything incorrectly your whole life, right? That seems like really that is really intense for people, and people get excited about it and consider it a positive thing.
Our experience through this kind of language, and it's beautiful and profound and worth exploring, but it's worth exploring in a way where we're saying, let's get fluent in this specific language and not literalize it and generalize it outside of the quadrant that it belongs in. Over time, I've moved.
Oh, and not do that. Oh, no, okay, yeah.
From being someone who's like, consciousness is
Okay.
everything, the universe arises out of consciousness, we are consciousness, from consciousness we come, into consciousness we shall return upon the death of this physical body, from being someone who found that very convincing to being someone who says, look, consciousness is this absolutely extraordinary, unique, sacred, incredible phenomenon that is an undeniable aspect of reality. It's the one thing we can be absolutely certain about, right, in terms of our first person experience, but it appears to be causally reducible, but not ontologically reducible to the brain. Now, of course, it's the brain
Causally reducible, but not ontologically reducible to the brain. Causally. Yeah, okay.
in the body. And of course, it's the brain in relationship to the environment. I love Dan Siegel's way of defining the brain as the extended nervous system throughout the body. I'm not just talking about some stuck in your head sort of way of thinking about it, but with some of the passion for panpsychism and for idealism within integral circles, I find that it usually correlates with wanting to believe in paranormal phenomena, with wanting to believe in an ultimate spirit that we can realize through spiritual practice, with wanting to believe that near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences somehow count as evidence beyond quote-unquote mere materialism. This is a key area that I think is really important, is how we unpack what counts as evidence for certain kinds of claims, metaphysical claims, paranormal claims, religious claims, even if they're dressed up in integral language as not really being that, they still are that. The affinity for notions of consciousness somehow are beyond neurobiology tends to go with a lot of this stuff that's pre-rational, but that gets
notions of consciousness are beyond neural biology. It's just a thing that's happening at the same time. You're saying it's like reducible to that. It's not reducible to that. It's a thing that's happening at the same time. This is quadrants again, and I'd really like to understand better how this perspective is understanding quadrants. Because I think that consciousness is not reducible to what's happening in the brain, because that if all you had was an exterior perspective of what's happening in my brain, you wouldn't understand what the interior perspective is, right? That's the point. That's what the quadrants are. That's what the quadrant theory is. And having my experience of what's going on in my brain directly right now, my brain being the whole, sensory apparatus, the whole thing, having that experience, I actually don't even have to know anything about what's going on with my brain chemistry or brainwave. I don't have to know anything about that, and it'll still happen. So it's not. I don't see how it's like. I don't think that this is reducible to that. I think it's just a totally different perspective on what's going on. It's the other half of the coin that is consciousness. There's a brain doing this. There's me happening right now. They're the same thing seen from two different perspectives. So when you say reducible, that's a very anti-quadrant view of reality. So that's where get into that.
Translated into integral language as being transrational. I think it's a valid concern in terms of how we parse out the relationship between experience and interpretation, the relationship between what certain experiences might mean and what kinds of assertions can be made about the world outside of my subjective interpretation based on those experiences. The interesting conversation starts on the other side of recognizing
and what we're also, I think what integral theory and the perennial wisdom is saying is that that's what it always has been. That's what this has always been. That's what the spiritual text and tradition has always been, is a way. How can we talk about this meaningfully in ways that will cross bridges and will be true whether you have the realization or not, or this particular, that particular, are they the same? So many questions, but how do we talk about it? This has been sort of the role of religion and spirituality as a social, construct.
That certain lines in the sand are what they are. For example, there is no replicated, peer-reviewed evidence for any kind of paranormal phenomena. That is just given, and the interesting conversation starts on the other.
There is no well, yeah, that's what makes it paranormal currently. If there becomes evidence for it, it stops being paranormal, right? Like UAPs are no longer paranormal. We have footage of them, but we still have no idea what they are.
other side of that, that's not interesting to me. And yet, my struggle with feeling like I'm part of the integral community is a lot of people who are deeply involved in integral do find debating that stuff interesting and do find asserting that stuff interesting and worthwhile. And that may just be a difference in temperament. I don't find that as compelling as you do. And
That's
I have
my
all these
opinion.
suspicions and biases about what it might
My
mean.
opinion is that that is a matter of temperament. People come to things with different interests. Hell, maybe you're a ghost hunter for a living, an integral informed ghost hunter, right? How do you fit your profession into this?
You do. I want integral to be more than New Age spirituality for smart people.
That'd be cool. New Age spirituality for
All right,
smart
final
people.
thoughts.
I like that. Well, geez.
Big thanks to everybody
Sounds
who made
fine.
it this far in the video. If you made it this far in the video,
I
type a
did.
comment down below and start it with the words, "Thanks for the deep dive," so I know you watched all the way.
I
Big
might.
thanks to Adam from
Well, he
Unthink
knows
Me.
I watched
This
it all the way.
video is really trying to get to the heart of our differences.
Great job.
Because I do think that's important.
Yeah.
Adam has said in his past videos that he feels a kind of kinship with me. We have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. I also was a huge fan and supporter of integral theory
I'm not a
for
fan.
a long time.
I don't like
I hope
fans.
he and other people who are coming from an integral perspective watch this video, understand that my perspective is good faith, and it is coming from a person who spent a long time in this community, a long time, thinking very in depth about integral ideas. I know a lot of people got into this community specifically because of the spiritual ideas related to it. And I think maybe Adam might be one of these people too. When I scroll through his videos on his channel.
For me, no, actually, I think I'm a weird one. I think people either come for levels or states, and I'm this weird person. I sort of like both of them the same amount. I'm sort of into both. I think, yeah, but there's a tendency in the community to be either more states and spiritual or more like social development and self-helpy, which usually translates into how like left or right brain you are, that kind of thing. Or just how skeptical, rational, cynical, skeptical, all these kind of, how much of that you are, how much you do that. I've always kind of been a bothy. I've always been a sort of platonic brain. I kind of like both of those parts of it. But it is interesting to pay attention to that. Yeah.
And I think into this community specifically because of the spiritual ideas related to it. And I think maybe Adam might be one of these people too. When I scroll through his videos on his channel,
and in fact, so no, I just thought about it. And when I first got into it, I think that the levels were what kept me going, what kept my interest. I was interested in levels as a social critic, I think, was my first hook. And I believe the spiritual part of it was not, I didn't understand it. It was like, wow, what, really? It was just kind of like, what? It was like that. It was like I was reading something that seemed really cool and interesting and true as like social commentary and philosophy, but I was like, wow, really? Because I was a strict like skeptic type, and through these I became interested in kind of doing that experiment for myself, and as a result of that, I've become a much more spiritual person in terms of what I call spirituality, and associated with other people who call themselves spiritual, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of stuff there about philosophy. It seems like his main interest is actually in the spiritual stuff, the stages of development, the states of consciousness. He said something at some point about thinking that I use the quadrants in kind of a trivial way, but actually I think the quadrants is actually the element that has the most to do with philosophy. And I don't really see him diving in deep to the philosophy stuff in that kind of way. He even mentioned something at some point where he seemed surprised that I don't believe in free will.
Yeah.
And he was like, we can make choices, as if that's what it means to have free will. Maybe I could just say something about that really briefly. The free part of free will means free from influence, like not determined by, determinism. And determinism is different than fatalism.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna have oh boy, this conversation is not as simple as you're making it out. And in particular, when I'm trying to understand the perspective that you have, as opposed to mine, I just find people who talk a lot and I can't get the perspective that they have, so I don't understand it. But I see a translation occurring here. Like, yes, that because we're just okay. Now we're breaking down what the meaning of free and will are. But I think that classically, when people have this discussion, that I make choices is proof of free will. Like, that's kind of where the conversation starts, right?
Determinism just means that there are reasons that determine.
So the integral perspective is that both are true, right? That I do make choices. That's true. That's the view from the inside. From the outside, it's all calculated by this physical matter calculator, meat computer, all that, the brain. That's just two views on the same thing: free will and determinism.
Determine why you do things. So if you believe in nature and nurture, then your will isn't free. It doesn't mean that you can't make choices, but those choices are not coming from a
Sure, I
perspective.
get all this. I've heard the Sam Harris. I've heard you. I've heard all this. I've heard this. I still make choices, and I think that's important to philosophy. And I feel like in a personal discussion, we could have a more, at least try to have a more interesting version of this. Because a lot of people have tried to have this very conversation, in particular Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and it doesn't go well ever. I've never seen it go well. So I doubt that this would go well.
Perspective that's free from influence. So of course we have will. It's just a heavily conditioned will, not a free will. Adam and I both play guitar. Knowing music theory doesn't stop a person from being able to improv. You can still
So the problem is that what you're calling will is sufficient for me to call free will. That's all. That's the only, we're having a semantic issue. What you would be willing to call will, I'm just calling it in the classical sense free will.
Choices, but those choices are informed by theory. How this is relevant is that these arguments about free will versus determinism are kind of freshman philosophy.
And they totally are, yeah. And it's the thing to get from this, though, is that both of those perspectives are morally important. Both of them are morally important to the decisions that you make every second. Because if you don't believe that the universe is calculated, you're going to be an idiot, right? A narcissist. You're going to think that whatever you think is true and whatever you want is how things are going to go. And if you think the other way around, that the only determinism, which one did I do first? That only determinism is true and free will doesn't exist. The universe is totally calculated. It doesn't matter what I do, so I'll be a lazy bum. I'll cheat people. Narcissism, right? It's like, if you only have a reductionist view of one quadrant or the other, and you're calling that linguistically, semantically, the nature of reality, it tends toward narcissism to not see both at once and the importance of both, just morally. And we all get this. But that's, to be honest, that's because the free will versus determinism debate has taken on so many shapes and has had so many faces. That's what I'm saying is the general character of the debate. Which this doesn't resolve. It's just some weird thing happened in time where now we're having this debate again with a slightly different kind of framing of it. But I think it's still the same debate. And I still hold that free will and determinism are both true. But I also don't care because I'm just using free will and determinism as shorthand for the quadrants in my own view. Like, I don't even know the history of that argument. I just know that it's a long and interesting one.
Sort of topics. Most people who believe in free will are just believing in it as a given without having really thought about it very much critically. So
the reason we're talking about it so much today, though, is that moral issue, is whether you prioritize, whether it's more important to your perspective that I make choices, that I'm really here, that it matters that I do things, or whether you're aware of the rational facts of reality, that things make you do things, that people do things because things influence them. Both of those are so morally important. And when you see someone, a thinker, a talker, an influencer, who's only representing one perspective, who's reducing reality to that perspective, quadrant fundamentalism, and saying everything is your choice, there are no things, affecting your choice, that's narcissistic baloney. When you have people that are saying there is no free will at all, it's just calculated, whatever you do, you're going to do it anyway. I think that's a really morally sick way to see life, because that's not the experience that I'm having. The experience that I'm having is that the things that I naturally do require effort. I naturally am bummed out by how much work I have to do. I naturally will be in pain because of the decisions I make, just the struggle of life. So I think that it's morally important to believe that the choices we make are a huge part of reality, that we are negotiating reality in real time always, and the choices that we make matter. So that's the classical debate, and it's not like either one of us don't understand the fundamentals of this. I think we're just kind of, I thought it was weird that the debate has changed in this generation to where I think that a lot of people are collapsing it in this way linguistically where it's no longer a debate. And I don't know that that's true.
I really just wonder how much people who are in the integral community are actually interested in philosophy at all, how informed they are about philosophy, how much they know about the regular arguments that are taking place just even on a modern and postmodern level. Because how can we do integrative philosophy when we don't even know the arguments that are happening between blue and orange? Again, I made a video about semantic compatibilism.
You know, and if we're being real, I wouldn't accuse you of being like ignorant of philosophy or anything. And I think that, you know, it's a Dunning-Kruger thing. Wherever you're at in that course, understanding the philosophy and the history of philosophy, two different things, right? Wherever you're at, you assume that, you know, you couldn't be any higher at it, and you couldn't, and that what you understand is like probably the important stuff, and you see other people as being like not as far along the path as you know. Sure, that's just a nature of learning. I tend to, yeah, like, it seems to me like people who are interested in integral generally have had an enduring interest in philosophy. Yeah, there's a few things that appeal to people about integral other than philosophy. Sure, those people exist.
As this kind of middle position between free will and determinism. And that's a good example of the kind of...
But I discovered Wilbur in a process of trying to get to the heart of things philosophically. And a lot of my philosophical influences are not influences on Wilbur particularly. There's a lot of different weird things, right? So yeah, I haven't gone back through time and gotten interested in everything that Wilbur was ever interested in. I think that would take longer than my life. But I do have a lot of things that have influenced me philosophically.
Stuff that I'm talking about, where a lot of the content that I make, I feel like it is really interested in philosophy. I really don't know how much people in the integral community are actually interested in philosophy. At the end of Adam's last video, I think he spent like maybe 20 minutes almost doing like a kind of spiritual pointing out instruction.
You know, I gotta say, I don't think I'm in a biased position of being myself, but I don't think people would describe me as not being interested in philosophy. I think one of the first things any person who's ever known me in my entire life would say is probably that I'm interested in philosophy. I think. But maybe what you consider interest in philosophy is not the same thing that I consider that. That's quite possible.
Are actually interested in philosophy. At the end of Adam's last video, I think he spent like maybe 20 minutes almost doing like a kind of spiritual pointing out instructions kind of a thing.
Yeah, just right here, right now. We are gonna look with the guitar directly and fully. And to contextualize that, might have been done. I was asking, does anything happen when you try this? I was like curious to see like what happens when you do this? Like what's your, because I want him to either say like, I just sat there and listened to you and it was dumb, or I want him to say like, oh yeah, I got kind of what was communicated to me, and I'm very familiar with that. I already know what you're trying to do there. Something like that. I was just looking for the response. That was my interest here. At what I am. What am I?
He really thinks that this Buddhist interpretation of awakening is the really good and important thing here. And basically...
Yeah, I think that, yeah, this is a good thing to teach people to ask themselves what they are. And in a very serious, set aside, no distraction, being present in this moment, asking myself, what am I? I think that's a really important thing to do. And it doesn't just do one thing, it does all sorts of things to do that. But it is, I think it's pretty compatible with like classical non-dual pointing out. I'm not the judge of that, but I think so.
What I found is that people in the integral community who are really focused on idealism and Buddhism and coming from a strong religious focus, many of them won't listen to reason. Even the name Unthink Me makes me worry. But I have seen some really good signs from Adam. He seems very good faith. He seems...
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. Like I don't know if people get I thought it was so obvious that I didn't want to explain it ever, but I don't know if people get Unthink Me, like what the point, like, I just think it's a description of what I'm doing. And what like a non-dual realization would be is like you're no longer thinking me. I'm not thinking me here. That reality is me, you know, unthinking me. But also deconstructing, because I'm also level 6. I'm also green pretty good. So uh, a lot of what I do is just deconstructing things without a necessarily heavy valence on it, just kind of picking it apart, looking at it, reconstructing it, trying it, and pushing it down the road a little ways and seeing if it holds up. That's a lot of what I do here.
Seems very honest. He seems very gracious. And so I have high hopes. And I would be willing to talk with him face to face and get more into the details. You might be seeing that happening. I hope that he spends a little bit of time and he watches some of the videos in the playlist that he might have missed to maybe dig in deeper to some of my ideas about these topics. So that way, when we do talk, it's more of a meta level discussion that's really informed by the stuff that I've already said. But yeah, I will be interested to see where we go from here. I'm also posting this on my I Am David Long channel, where a lot of my old videos are living, and I'm not posting it on the Non-Reductionist channel because I want to save the Non-Reductionist
I get
channel
that
for
now. I get that now. I understand that now. Yeah, this is annoying. This is like, you didn't set out to make videos to provoke this response. You don't want this response. And you like, it's just a natural thing that's going to happen. This is like something I've realized. I thought originally the point was to like provoke people like me and to get into like debating about integral theory, which I thought was cool. I was like, yeah. But I mean, it sounds like you genuinely just like are kind of over these people, me and people like me for the most part. And like, I'm just kind of a weird, unlikely ally as you've moved on from this thing. Sure. I tried to cross my legs. So I've been here like a long time. I've been here very long and I've almost made it. But yeah, no, this is super fun. And yeah, like yeah, my whole deal is I do things like this, and I think it's cool, and I think it's fun, and it's really good for me, health-wise, and I'm just having a great time doing this. Totally open to doing anything with you, whatever. We just go into Discord, do a talk or whatever. It doesn't even need to be framed as like this discussion necessarily. I'm kind of over it because, like, I feel like now I just want to know more about non-reductionism because we've established the context of non-reductionism. And now I'm just kind of curious about that, so it kind of proceed more like an educational thing toward me of what your thing is, with a little bit of debating on stuff. But I mean, the fundamental points, I think we found like our circling point, and we're kind of like, I think we just kind of both realize like, I don't know if progress is going to be made this way, much further progress on these points, criticizing integral, and I'm just more curious about, talking more about theory and philosophy. Yeah, I think you're on the same page. But this was cool. I wish it got like, I was always really excited when it got a little more like steamy and provocative. But yeah, we're just really nice, and I don't know what about the experience other people have had with integral. I've had very little with it. I cared very little too. And maybe like the way I filter people and work with people is a little different. I mean, certainly it's a little different. I'm very bizarre, but yeah, I haven't really had these problems with the community so far. If David's the community or anti the community, find him pretty cool, really thought provoking, in touch with himself. This is how I find the community, whether it's Integral Institute or fans of my channel or fans of non-reductionism and everything, or some other whole different, all these, like, I just find a lot of really, really, really cool people. And so to me, it's just weird to have all these voices that are like, oh, these people are the worst, like they're so dogmatic and rigid and judgmental, and they're not constructing anything, and they're elevating, like, I'm not really, I see elements of what you're saying and where you're pointing out, I see it and I agree with it. It's just that that's not the main thing going on. I'd say it's like, to me, it's just a tiny thing going on relative to a very big thing going on that I'm really excited about, that I'm really pleased with, and that just makes me feel better about the prospect of being in a civilization on Earth right now. Pretty cool. I'm glad about it. I'm glad for it. And obviously I'm not, I've done a little yoga teaching, but I'm not a spiritual teacher. It's just experimental for me when I do prayers or meditations or anything, and I find them appropriate to this context. I hope that they are. This was specifically, I was curious, like, I just was kind of curious how someone would receive something like that, and I'd like to do more of that, because little prayers and affirmations, I do them all the time. I insert them into things all the time, and I like to do that more socially. So I'm trying to do it up on my channel and in relationships more. It's kind of a hard thing to do for people that aren't used to it. It's like it's similar to if you go to a random person's house and say grace at their dinner table, like whether they do it or don't do it in the first place. That's always going to be kind of a weird thing. I'm leading prayer now. Take a deep breath in, right? I mean, that's a weird thing to do. But I want to culturally normalize it because these are really handy tricks for me. And I hope to teach them and make culturally normalize and legitimize them. That's like my next, like what I'm actually doing is that this is therapy for me, and I wanted to share integral theory, and I feel like it's going well and I'm having a good time. But yeah, I mean, I have like next level ambitions with what I would want to do with it and where I'd want to be with it. I'm perfectly fine with where I'm at, but I don't really see myself as being anyone who matters or like on a mission in the same practical way you are. I'm more on like an artistic and moral mission that is not the same thing as my life or my career yet. I have a whole different thing going on for all that. But yeah, this is what I do. And you or anyone who's watching, I'm always open. I just need to get that at least first clarification that like this is going to happen, that it's serious enough that it'll happen, that you'll show up and that we'll have a conversation enough of the time that it'll feel like worth it. I'm down to have these sorts of conversations. I particularly want to have more argumentative conversations. So that's why one of the reasons why I really appreciate this and I hope to do more like it. Because I have too much agreeable conversations in this context. Anyway, I'm so pleased to make this. I don't know if anyone's here now, but anyone watching this in the edited version, if I make it, or in the present moment, also, just that I'm really grateful to be here. I had to slide this in pretty quick. I have to go to bed now, and this was so awesome to have this video made to help clarify, a possible learning opportunity for me and a possible resolution for other people. So I hope that this continues in a different direction, I think, is kind of what I'm looking at probably.
Talking about non-reductionism. I really don't want to talk about integral theory. And if I am going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it on this channel. Also, part of the reason why I went so in depth here is because I kind of want to make just a few final videos about integral that are definitive, so I don't have to keep on re-going over this territory over and over again. I don't want to spend really any time
Agreed.
debating.
I mean, that's where I am here now too. I'm kind of over it. I haven't engaged with these criticisms yet, so here I've done it.
Integralist. I want to spend all my time developing non-reductionism. But I know a lot of people are going to be coming from the integral community.
Yeah.
And as it relates to some of these topics, I'd like to be able to just point to this video and be like, that's what I have to say about it.
Dope.
So as it relates to non-reductionism,
Oh my God,
I'm currently working on building on-ramps and off-ramps. On-ramps for people who want to learn and off-ramps for
Off-ramps
people
to
who
me,
don't
baby.
resonate with the ideas. So if you don't like this video, non-reductionism is probably not for you. If you vibe with this video and you want to learn more about non-reductionism, go to the Non-Reductionism channel and check out some of the videos there. Dig in deeper and check out our links, join the community, get involved. But I'm going to leave it there. Thanks to everybody for watching. Big thanks to my Patreons. If you want to support
I think that's it. I'll watch and see if there's a
supporter yourself.
Should I wait for the post-credits
in the
thing?
next one.
The post-credits teaser. Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. It's super late. Thanks for being here. I'm working on just.
You're ready to remember every detail of your life, like your mind was 20 again. Don't believe me? Give me 60 seconds.
Hang on.
The worst part is you've been lied to by white coat charlatans.
Oh, it's true. We've been the whites. Anyways, I'm not gonna do this every time with the live stream. This has been an exercise in getting my live stream working and being really excited to have this conversation with David. It looks like I've been here almost 4 hours, and this is a test to see if my software crashed. It probably did. I don't know. It doesn't look like it did. So hopefully I'm still here and I can make this into the final product. I will be doing other stuff. This was just a really convenient opportunity. So I hope you'll enjoy as I kind of get more into streaming more of the time as opposed to making videos that are basically streams. Did anybody visit me? I got another one. I'm patient. Yeah, this is really fun for me. I know we're getting really into deep spaces and a lot of repeating and stuff, but we're having fun. This is like us just nerding out here. Oh yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe come to my house and be my friend. There might be a little vetting. 'Cause, who am I talking to here? Jeez. Anyways, yeah. Reach out. We could have a coffee. I don't know. Is this someone from my town, or is this just like someone I already know and I should be ashamed of myself for not knowing who it is? I don't know. It's 2:15. I'm gonna go to bed. I'll see you guys soon. Very thankful to be here and very thankful. I'm a complete mental wreck right now. Do you like my I got I got this as a present for myself. Isn't that cute? I got a present for myself, and it's like it makes a little galaxy. It's totally stupid, and you just plug it in with USB, and it makes a galaxy behind you. Isn't that neat? Kind of dumb, but I like. I don't do that a lot. I just got myself a present, and it was like nice. Thank you. How about this? Go get yourself a present. You know, you've been getting all the presents for everyone else. Okay. And then I fumble around with my stuff for the rest of the night.